Before we begin, a big thanks to Jeffernon for suggesting this mystery that continues to haunt aviation history. If you have any story ideas, make sure to comment them below. And with that being said, let's begin. The transmission that should never have existed. Picture this. You're a radio operator at Melbourne Flight Service, October 21st, 1978. It's 7:12 p.m. The frequency crackles with a young pilot's voice, confused, but still professional. Melbourne, that strange aircraft, is hovering on top of me again. A pause, then with dawning horror, it is hovering, and it's not an aircraft. What follows next is 17 seconds of metallic scraping that sounds like nothing you've ever heard through aviation radio. A grinding, oscillating shriek that makes your teeth ache. Then silence. Not the gradual fade of a distant signal. Not the static burst of equipment failure. Just instant, absolute silence. As if someone had surgically removed Frederick Valentich from existence. Those 17 seconds of sound still exist. You can listen to them today, digitized and preserved in aviation archives. Engineers have analysed them with every tool available. The conclusion? No known aircraft makes that sound. No known metal-on-metal collision produces that specific frequency pattern. It remains to this day unexplained. Frederick Valentich was 20 years old. He had brown hair, an easy smile, and dreams of becoming a commercial airline pilot. On that October evening in 1978, he climbed into a rented Cessna 182L at Moorabbin Airport near Melbourne, filed a flight plan to King Island, and became one of aviation's most enduring mysteries. Not because he disappeared — pilots unfortunately disappear — but because of what he reported seeing in the minutes before his vanishing, and because of what the Australian government desperately tried to hide for the next 45 years. This is not a ghost story. This is documented fact, preserved in radio transcripts, witness testimonies, and recently declassified government files that paint a picture far stranger than fiction. What happened to Frederick Valentich over Bass Strait challenges everything we think we know about our skies, our governments, and perhaps our place in the universe. Part 1. The official account. The evening of October 21st, 1978 was perfect for flying. The weather reports from Bureau of Meteorology showed calm conditions across Bass Strait, that notorious stretch of water between mainland Australia and Tasmania. Visibility extended for miles. Wind speeds barely resisted. It was the kind of night that made young pilots eager to log flight hours. Frederick Valentich had earned his private pilot licence with a Class 4 instrument rating. Not exceptional, but competent. He'd logged about 150 hours of flight time, mostly in single-engine Cessnas like the one he rented that evening. Friends described him as enthusiastic about aviation, perhaps over-eager at times, but careful about following procedures. He'd applied twice to join the Royal Australian Air Force, and been rejected both times. Not for lack of skill, but because of what evaluators called insufficient educational qualifications. The Cessna 182L he signed out was a reliable four-seater, registration VH-DSJ. Nothing special about it. Regular maintenance records. No history of problems. Just another small aircraft among hundreds that crossed Australian skies daily. Frederick's flight plan showed a simple route. Moorabbin to King Island, a distance of about 125 miles over water. Estimated flight time, 69 minutes. Purpose of flight, picking up crayfish for a family dinner. Except that was a lie. King Island Airport had no record of Frederick Valentich requesting landing clearance. No crayfish order existed. No one on King Island expected him. His friends later admitted Frederick had talked about wanting to photograph UFOs, but they dismissed it as enthusiasm rather than serious intention. The real purpose of his flight remains unknown, buried with whatever truth disappeared that night. At 6:19 p.m, Frederick's Cessna lifted off from Moorabbin's runway. Air traffic control noted nothing unusual. He climbed to his assigned altitude of 4,500 feet, maintained proper heading, and radioed position updates as required. For the first 47 minutes, everything proceeded exactly as hundreds of flights had proceeded before. Then, at 7:06 p.m, Frederick initiated contact with Melbourne Flight Service. "Melbourne, this is Delta Sierra Juliet. Is there any known traffic below 5,000? The radio operator, Steve Roby, checked his radar and charts. "Delta Sierra Juliet, no known traffic." "Delta Sierra Juliet, I am seems to be a large aircraft below 5,000. What followed over the next 6 minutes would become one of the most analysed radio exchanges in aviation history. Frederick described an elongated metallic object with 4 bright landing lights. It approached from the east, passed over him at high speed, then circled back. He reported it had a shiny metallic surface and a green light. At one point he said it seemed to be playing games with him. Roby, maintaining professional calm, tried to help identify the object. Military aircraft? None scheduled. Commercial traffic? Nothing on radar. Weather balloon? Wrong altitude and behaviour. With each exchange, Frederick's voice grew more strained, though he never panicked. He was a pilot reporting observations, even as those observations defied explanation. At 7:09 p.m, Frederick reported his engine was rough idling and coughing. Roby asked if he could identify the aircraft type. "It isn't an aircraft," Frederick replied, his voice carrying a note of wonder rather than fear. The object, according to Frederick's descriptions, moved in ways that violated basic aerodynamics. It stopped instantly from high speed. It hovered without any visible means of support. It circled his plane at distances and angles that should have created catastrophic turbulence but didn't. At 7:12 p.m. and 9 seconds, Frederick's final coherent transmission came through. "It is hovering, and it's not an aircraft." Then came those 17 seconds of metallic scraping. Then nothing. Roby tried to re-establish contact for the next 5 minutes. "Delta Sierra Juliet Melbourne. Delta Sierra Juliet Melbourne. Do you read?" Only static answered. He notified his supervisor. Search and rescue protocols activated immediately. The search began at first light on October 22nd. The Royal Australian Air Force deployed aircraft. The Navy sent vessels. Civilian boats joined the effort. They scoured 1,000 square miles of ocean for 4 days. The weather remained calm, the water relatively shallow. Ideal conditions for spotting wreckage. They found nothing. No oil slick that would indicate a crash. No floating debris from the aircraft's interior. No emergency beacon signal, though the Cessna carried one designed to activate on impact. Most tellingly, no body. In those water temperatures, a body would have floated within 24 to 48 hours. The Department of Transport's official investigation concluded with bureaucratic simplicity. Presumed fatal accident. Cause unknown. They suggested 5 possible explanations. Frederick became disoriented and flew into the water. He experienced engine failure. He deliberately flew into the water. He became incapacitated and lost control, or he staged his own disappearance. None of these explanations addressed the metallic object Frederick described. None explained the 17 seconds of unexplained sound. None accounted for the complete absence of wreckage in thoroughly searched waters. The case officially closed in 1980. Frederick Valentich was declared dead in absentia. His family received a death certificate. Insurance claims were processed. As far as the Australian government was concerned, the young pilot had tragically crashed, and that was that. Except it wasn't. Part 2. The documents that never made the news. In the weeks following Frederick's disappearance, something curious happened. Or rather, didn't happen. Despite the sensational nature of the case, a pilot reporting a UFO moments before vanishing, mainstream Australian media coverage dried up remarkably quickly. The story made initial headlines, then disappeared from newspapers as if editors had collectively decided it wasn't worth pursuing. But people had seen things that night. They'd filed official reports. Those reports went into government archives, where they sat untouched and unexamined by journalists for decades. Roy Manifold, a plumber and amateur photographer, was setting up a time-lapse camera on the shore near Cape Otway Lighthouse at the exact time of Frederick's disappearance. He wanted to capture the sunset over Bass Strait. When he developed the film, one frame showed something extraordinary, a dense black object with what appeared to be a bright light, or exhaust trail emerging from it, hovering over the water. The photograph's timestamp matched Frederick's final transmission within minutes. Manifold took his photograph to the Herald Sun newspaper. They showed initial interest, even sending the image for analysis. Then, abruptly, they returned it without publication or explanation. Manifold tried other media outlets with similar results. The photograph eventually made its way to UFO researchers, but by then the trail of official interest had gone cold. 5 other witnesses filed reports with various authorities that night. A couple camping at Cape Otway reported a green light moving erratically over the water. 2 girls driving along the coastal road described a bright object dancing in the sky before shooting upward at impossible speed. A fishing boat captain logged an unusual green phosphorescence in the water, unlike any bioluminescence he'd seen in 30 years of sailing Bass Strait. These reports shared common elements: green light, erratic movement, the time window matching Frederick's disappearance. They were filed with police, Coast Guard and aviation authorities. They were stamped, dated and archived. They were never investigated. In 1982, researcher Bill Chalker gained access to Department of Transport files through a Freedom of Information request. Hidden among routine documentation, he found a memo that shouldn't have existed. Dated October 24th, 1978, 3 days after the disappearance, it came from an unnamed Royal Australian Air Force officer to the department's Aviation Safety Branch. The memo's language was carefully bureaucratic, but its implications were staggering. It referenced non-ballistic movement patterns inconsistent with conventional aircraft, observed by ground-based radar systems on the night of October 21st. It mentioned anomalous returns in the area of Frederick's last known position. Most significantly, it stated that further documentation has been classified under national security provisions and forwarded to appropriate channels. Chalker pressed for these classified documents. He was told they didn't exist. When he provided the memo's reference numbers, he was told the classification was a mistake, that the documents contained nothing relevant to the Valentich case. When he formally appealed, his request was denied on grounds of international intelligence sharing agreements. International, not domestic. Someone outside Australia had an interest in what happened to Frederick Valentich. The pilot's father, Guido Valentich, spent years trying to understand his son's fate. In 1980, he gave an interview to Italian newspaper Giornale dei Misteri that Australian media largely ignored. He revealed that Frederick had been obsessed with UFOs for years, collecting magazine articles and attending UFO discussion groups in Melbourne. More significantly, Frederick had told his father 2 weeks before the disappearance that he believed he would soon make contact. He said strange things were happening, Guido recalled. Instruments in planes were going wrong. Pilots were seeing things. He believed something big was about to happen, and he wanted to be part of it. This context transformed Frederick's final flight. Not a routine crayfish run, but possibly a deliberate attempt to encounter something he believed existed in Bass Strait. The question became not what Frederick saw, but what he might have been looking for, and whether something was looking for him. In 1983, an aviation mechanic named John Murphy came forward with disturbing information. He'd serviced Frederick's rented Cessna 2 days before the disappearance. Frederick had paid cash for an unusual request. Murphy was to check and double-check the aircraft's radio equipment, specifically its ability to transmit on emergency frequencies. Frederick had seemed nervous, constantly checking over his shoulder, asking if anyone else had access to maintenance records. Murphy had thought it odd but not alarming. Young pilots could be particular about equipment. After the disappearance, he'd reported the encounter to investigators. They'd taken his statement, thanked him, and never followed up. When Murphy later tried to access his own statement through official channels, he was told no such document existed in the case file. The pattern was clear: systematic suppression of information that didn't fit the official narrative of a simple crash. Witnesses ignored, evidence dismissed, documents classified or disappeared. Someone wanted Frederick Valentich to remain an unfortunate accident rather than an impossible mystery. But secrets have a way of surfacing, especially when they're buried in government archives waiting for declassification deadlines. Part 3. The Classified Connections. For 45 years, the complete government files on Frederick Valentich remained partially classified. Standard procedure for aviation accidents allowed full declassification after 30 years. Yet when 2008 arrived, researchers found key documents still restricted under national security provisions. It took until 2023 for the National Archives of Australia to release what they claimed was the complete file. Even then, numerous pages showed heavy redaction. What emerged from these documents fundamentally changed understanding of that October night. The files revealed that Bass Strait in 1978 was far from empty ocean. It was one of the most heavily monitored maritime zones in the Southern Hemisphere, though few Australians knew it. The Cold War had turned these waters into a chessboard, where submarines played deadly games of detection and evasion. American nuclear submarines regularly transited Bass Strait, using its complex underwater topography to mask their acoustic signatures. Soviet intelligence vessels operated just outside Australian territorial waters trying to track these submarines. Australia, caught between superpowers, officially maintained neutrality while secretly cooperating with American surveillance efforts. 3 underwater listening stations operated along the Victorian coast, part of the classified SOSUS, Sound Surveillance System Network. These hypersensitive hydrophones could detect submarine movements hundreds of miles away. They also, according to declassified technical specifications, could pick up aircraft impacts on water surfaces, yet they recorded nothing on October 21st, 1978. A recently released document dated October 23rd, 1978, showed the United States Naval Intelligence Service had formally requested all data related to aerial disturbance over Bass Strait on the night of Frederick's disappearance. The request came through diplomatic channels reserved for highest priority intelligence matters. Australia complied, sending not just the Valentich case files, but also associated electromagnetic anomaly recordings. Electromagnetic anomaly recordings, not standard procedure for a missing Cessna. The documents revealed that RAAF Base East Sale had tracked an unusual radar target that night. Not Frederick's Cessna, they had that clearly identified. Something else, moving at speeds alternating between hover and over 3,000 miles per hour. The radar operators had tagged it as equipment malfunctioned until it intersected with Frederick's flight path. Then it had disappeared from radar at the exact moment Frederick's transmission cut off. Wing Commander Keith Jessup filed a report stating his belief that the object exhibited controlled flight characteristics beyond current technological capabilities. His superiors buried the report and transferred Jessup to a desk position in Canberra. He took early retirement 6 months later, signing a comprehensive non-disclosure agreement. The American interest went deeper than simple intelligence gathering. A CIA assessment dated November 1978, declassified only partially in 2023, discussed parallels between Bass Strait incident and Project Blue Book case number 3201. That case, from 1952, involved a United States Air Force pilot who reported similar metallic objects with green lights before experiencing complete electrical failure. He'd survived, landing his aircraft on manual backup systems, but suffered radiation exposure consistent with close proximity to an unknown energy source. Frederick Valentich's medical records subpoenaed during the investigation showed he'd had a comprehensive physical examination just 3 weeks before his disappearance. Blood work, chest x-rays, vision tests, all normal. Yet the investigation file contained a curious addendum, a request from the Australian Radiation Laboratory for any preserved biological samples from Frederick Valentich. No explanation for why radiation exposure might be relevant to a presumed crash. The surveillance corridor Frederick entered wasn't just monitored for submarines. Declassified American documents revealed Operation Sky Scanner, a joint US-Australian program using the area to test advanced electronic warfare systems, experimental radar spoofing, communications jamming, even early electromagnetic pulse weapons. The exact nature of tests conducted on October 21st, 1978 remained classified, but the operations log showed unscheduled termination due to civilian air traffic interference. Frederick hadn't just flown into monitored airspace. He'd flown into an active military testing zone that shouldn't have been accessible to civilian aircraft. Yet no NOTAM, notice to airmen, had been issued warning pilots away from the area. Either the military had failed in basic safety protocols, or they hadn't expected anyone to be flying there, despite Frederick's filed flight plan. A handwritten note in the margins of one document, presumably from an intelligence analyst, posed a chilling question. If target acquisition was successful, where is the package? Target acquisition, package, language suggesting Frederick and his aircraft weren't victims but objectives. The Royal Australian Navy's involvement proved equally puzzling. The destroyer HMAS Torrens was conducting exercises 100 miles south of Frederick's route. Its log showed it diverted toward the search area before official search and rescue operations began. How did they know to divert if Frederick's disappearance hadn't yet been reported? The log offered no explanation, only coordinates and the cryptic notation. Standing orders executed. In 2019, a retired United States Navy sonar operator named Marcus Webb violated his non-disclosure agreement to speak with researcher Keith Basterfield. Webb had been stationed at the secret Pine Gap facility in Central Australia in 1978, officially analysing submarine acoustic signatures. On October 21st, his equipment had detected what he described as impossible sounds from Bass Strait. It wasn't mechanical, Webb explained. Not like engines or propellers. It was modulated, almost musical, but at frequencies that hurt to process. The computers couldn't classify it. We were ordered to delete the recordings and report equipment malfunction. I kept a partial copy on personal tape. The FBI confiscated it during a routine security check 3 months later. The implications were staggering. Multiple government agencies had detected, tracked and documented something extraordinary in Bass Strait that night. They'd moved to investigate, or intercept, before Frederick was reported missing. They'd systematically suppressed evidence and silenced witnesses, and the Americans had been involved from the beginning, suggesting this wasn't an isolated incident but part of something larger. Yet questions remained. If military forces had been tracking the object Frederick encountered, why hadn't they warned him? If they'd known something dangerous operated in Bass Strait, why allow civilian flights at all? And most disturbingly, if Frederick's disappearance was connected to classified military operations, why had no one been held accountable for his loss? The answer might lie in what happened after 1978, a pattern of incidents that suggested Frederick Valentich was neither the first nor the last to encounter something extraordinary over Bass Strait. Part 4. The modern anomaly chain commercial airline pilot Captain Richard Davies had 23 years of experience when he encountered something that made him question everything he thought he knew about aviation. On March 15, 2004, flying a Boeing 737 from Melbourne to Launceston, he crossed Bass Strait at 35,000 feet under clear conditions. What happened next would have ended his career if his co-pilot hadn't witnessed it too. A green, luminous object, roughly oval in shape, appeared off their starboard wing, not on radar, not on collision avoidance systems, visible only to human eyes. It paced their aircraft for 12 minutes, maintaining perfect relative position despite the 737's 450-knot airspeed. Then it accelerated upward at an angle Davies estimated at 70 degrees, disappearing in seconds. Davies faced a choice: report the sighting and risk his reputation, or stay silent and violate aviation safety protocols. He chose to file an official report. The response was swift and unsettling. Within 48 hours, representatives from the Australian Transport Safety Bureau interviewed him, took his statement, and classified it under environmental phenomena. They strongly suggested he avoid discussing the incident publicly. His co-pilot, First Officer Jennifer Chen, kept detailed personal notes. They knew, she wrote. The investigators weren't surprised. They had a protocol for this. forms specifically designed for anomalous aerial observations. How many pilots have filled out these forms? The answer emerged through careful research by aviation safety advocate Michael Carmody. Using Freedom of Information requests, he discovered that between 2000 and 2019, at least 47 commercial pilots had reported unusual phenomena over Bass Strait. Green lights featured in 31 reports, electromagnetic interference in 23, complete instrument failure in 8. The geographic concentration was remarkable. Plot the incidents on a map, and they clustered in a corridor roughly 50 miles wide, running northeast to southwest through Bass Strait. The exact corridor Frederick Valentich had entered in 1978. Captain Sarah Hendricks experienced the worst recorded incident in 2012. Flying a Qantas 737 with 162 passengers, she encountered what she described as coordinated harassment by multiple green lights. They surrounded her aircraft, matching every evasive manoeuvre. Her instruments failed in sequence, first GPS, then radio altimeter, then primary flight display. For 6 minutes she flew on backup instruments and visual references, her passengers unaware of the crisis. They were testing us, she told investigators, seeing how we'd react, what systems they could compromise. It felt deliberate, intelligent. Qantas management placed her on administrative leave pending psychological evaluation. She passed, returned to flying, but never crossed Bass Strait again, accepting only routes that avoided the area. The electromagnetic effects showed disturbing patterns. Analysis by electronics engineer Tom Patterson revealed that the interference specifically targeted certain frequencies, those used by military communications and encrypted data links. Civilian systems failed as collateral damage. Whatever caused the interference understood human technology well enough to attack its weak points. In 2016, the Royal Australian Navy quietly rerouted submarine training exercises away from Bass Strait. The official reason cited environmental concerns for marine mammals. Retired Admiral James Morrison later admitted the real reason. 3 submarines had experienced simultaneous complete electrical failures while submerged in the strait. Emergency ballast blows had brought them to the surface, but investigators couldn't explain what had caused systems designed with triple redundancy to fail simultaneously. Tiger Airways Flight 381 provided the most documented case. On November 8, 2018, the Airbus A320 carried 178 passengers from Sydney to Melbourne. Approaching Bass Strait, Captain Michael Torres noticed an unusual green phosphorescence in the clouds ahead. He requested deviation around the weather. Melbourne Control reported clear skies, no precipitation on radar. Torres trusted his eyes over instruments. As he began the deviation, passengers on the right side of the aircraft started recording with their phones. 12 separate videos captured what happened next. A metallic sphere, approximately 30 feet in diameter, emerged from the phosphorescent cloud and positioned itself directly above the aircraft. For 4 minutes, it maintained position while every electronic device on the plane, from navigation systems to passenger entertainment units, flickered erratically. Then it accelerated vertically and vanished. The videos went viral before authorities could suppress them. The Australian Transport Safety Bureau issued a statement attributing the sighting to ball lightning, despite meteorologists pointing out that no thunderstorm activity existed within 500 miles. The passenger videos revealed details that challenged conventional explanation. The object's surface showed no seams, rivets, or visible propulsion systems. It maintained perfect stability despite the aircraft's wake turbulence. Most remarkably, frame-by-frame analysis showed it didn't actually move when it disappeared. It seemed to fade out of visible spectrum while remaining in the same position. Bass Strait earned its reputation as Australia's Bermuda Triangle, but the comparison wasn't entirely accurate. The Bermuda Triangle's mysteries involved disappearances. Bass Strait's mysteries involved encounters, repeated documented contact, with something that chose to reveal itself to commercial aircraft, while remaining invisible to military surveillance. Or perhaps not invisible. A leaked 2019 Royal Australian Air Force briefing suggested they'd been tracking persistent anomalous returns over Bass Strait for decades. The briefing discussed protocols for avoiding inadvertent engagement and stressed that pilots should not attempt intercept or investigation of unusual targets in the region. They knew something operated in Bass Strait. They'd known since at least 1978, possibly earlier. They'd chosen to allow civilian aircraft to continue flying through the area, accepting whatever risk that entailed. The question was whether they were protecting the public from knowledge of these encounters, or protecting whatever was causing them from public scrutiny. The modern incidents shared one crucial detail with Frederick Valentich's disappearance: the complete absence of official explanation. No coherent theory explained how multiple unrelated aircraft could encounter similar phenomena across 4 decades. No natural phenomenon accounted for metallic objects that defied physics. No secret military project remained operational and unacknowledged for 45 years, unless of course it wasn't military at all. Part 5. The question no one can answer. Geoffrey Thurgood spent 37 years as an air crash investigator. He'd examined wreckage from 200 accidents, testified in countless inquests, and thought he'd seen every way an aircraft could fail. The Valentich case haunted him precisely because it broke every rule he'd learned. When a plane crashes in water, he explained in a 2020 interview, it leaves evidence, always. Oil spreads for miles and lingers for days. Composite materials float. Seats contain foam that's essentially unsinkable. Even if the aircraft sinks intact, which is rare, bodies eventually surface due to decomposition gases. The Cessna 182 had mechanical controls with steel cables that would survive impact and sink slowly. We should have found something. Bass Strait's characteristics made the absence of wreckage even more puzzling. Average depth, 200 feet. Seafloor composition, sandy sediment over limestone. Currents, predictable and well mapped. Commercial fishing vessels crisscrossed these waters daily, their nets dragging the bottom. In the 45 years since Frederick's disappearance, they'd found no aircraft parts. The theory that Frederick staged his disappearance collapsed under scrutiny. His bank accounts remained untouched. His passport never surfaced at any border crossing. No credible sighting ever emerged despite extensive media coverage. His girlfriend, Rhonda Rushton, insisted he'd been genuinely excited about their planned future together. He'd put a deposit on an engagement ring 3 days before his disappearance. Private investigator Malcolm Sutton spent 5 years tracking every lead, funded by the Valentich family's desperate search for answers. He found nothing suggesting Frederick had motivation or means to disappear. People who fake their deaths make mistakes, Sutton noted. They access money, contact family, leave digital footprints. Frederick left nothing. It's as if he simply ceased to exist. The suicide theory proved equally problematic. Frederick's psychological profile showed no indicators of depression or distress. He'd scheduled flying lessons for the following week, paid 6 months advance rent on his apartment, and told friends about his plans to apply again for commercial pilot training. His final radio transmissions revealed confusion and wonder, not despair. If Frederick had experienced mechanical failure or spatial disorientation, why describe a metallic object in such specific detail? 7 minutes of coherent observation couldn't be dismissed as hallucination. The transmission showed no signs of hypoxia or carbon monoxide poisoning. His speech remained clear, his responses logical. The 17 seconds of metallic sound defied all attempted explanation. Audio analysis by the University of Melbourne's Acoustic Laboratory identified multiple frequency harmonics that didn't match any known aircraft noise. The sound exhibited Doppler characteristics suggesting rapid rotation, but no part of a Cessna 182 could produce such frequencies even in catastrophic failure. Aviation engineer Patricia Williams attempted to recreate the sound using aircraft components. She tried propeller strikes on various materials, engine failures, structural collapses. Nothing matched. The closest approximation came from electromagnetically induced vibration in aluminum sheeting, but that required powerful external magnetic fields far beyond anything a small aircraft would encounter naturally. The government's behaviour raised its own questions. In 1982, Transport Minister Ralph Hunt ordered all Valentich files sealed for 30 years, citing public interest. When pressed by Parliament to explain, he stated only that premature release could cause unnecessary distress and speculation. What information could cause distress beyond what the family already endured? In 2008, when the 30-year period expired, key files remained classified. The government cited national security provisions that should never have applied to a civilian aircraft accident. Legal challenges by Freedom of Information advocates revealed that multiple agencies, defence, intelligence, foreign affairs, had placed holds on different documents. The coordination suggested high-level decision-making about maintaining secrecy. The partial declassification in 2023 answered some questions while raising others. Why had the United States shown such immediate interest? What were the electromagnetic anomaly recordings they'd requested? Why had Australian military assets moved toward Frederick's position before he was reported missing? Former intelligence analyst David Crawford, speaking anonymously, offered a possibility that challenged conventional thinking. What if Frederick Valentich encountered something that wasn't hostile, but was absolutely not meant to be seen? What if his disappearance wasn't an attack but a containment measure? That would explain the government's response. They're not covering up a crime but a contact. This theory aligned disturbingly well with the evidence. Frederick had deliberately sought out UFO phenomena. He'd positioned himself in an area of repeated sightings. He'd encountered something that matched his expectations. Then he'd vanished without violence, without wreckage, without any sign of destruction. The continued incidents over Bass Strait suggested an ongoing presence, something that revealed itself selectively, tested human aircraft systems, then withdrew without causing harm. Commercial pilots reported feeling observed, studied, evaluated. None reported feeling threatened, despite the obvious danger of instrument failures at altitude. Captain Richard Davies, reflecting on his 2004 encounter, voiced what many pilots thought privately. It knew we were there, it chose to show itself. It could have done anything to our aircraft. We were completely vulnerable. Instead, it just watched us, like it was checking on our progress, seeing how far we'd come technologically. The Bass Strait mystery had evolved from a single disappearance to a pattern of contact. Frederick Valentich might not have crashed or been destroyed. He might have achieved exactly what he'd sought, contact with intelligence beyond Earth. The price of that contact remained unknown, as did its purpose. But one fact remained undeniable. Something extraordinary operated in Bass Strait. It had been there in 1978 when Frederick vanished. It was still there in 2024, still watching, still waiting, still selecting who would see it, and who would be allowed to remember. The Australian government continued its policy of official denial and unofficial acknowledgement. Commercial aircraft still crossed Bass Strait daily. Pilots still reported green lights and electromagnetic anomalies. And somewhere in classified archives, the complete truth about Frederick Valentich waited for someone brave enough to reveal it. What if the most terrifying conspiracy wasn't hidden in the stars but buried beneath our feet? What if the government wasn't covering up visitors from another world, but something we created ourselves, something that refused to stay dead, Before we dive into tonight's story, I want to give a thank you to Marker 9410, Jackman and Tyler Bailey, and so many others who suggested this topic. Your ideas keep this channel going, so please keep leaving your suggestions in the comments below. Tonight we're heading to northern New Mexico, to a place where the desert keeps secrets, and where one man's curiosity may have cost him everything. This is the story of the Archuleta Protocol. Part 1. The Forgotten Files. Daniel Reeves had spent 46 years trying to forget Dulce, New Mexico. He'd been largely successful until the morning of March 12, 2025, when the past arrived in his email inbox disguised as a PDF. At 67, Daniel lived alone in a modest ranch house outside Alamogordo, where the desert stretched endlessly, and neighbours were measured in miles rather than feet. Retirement suited him. He'd spent his career as a geotechnical engineer, drilling holes into the earth for the Department of Energy, Los Alamos National Laboratory, and various contractors whose names changed more often than their security clearances. He'd mapped fault lines, assessed geological stability, and kept his mouth shut about things that didn't concern him. The email came from the Veterans History Archive Initiative, a grant program encouraging former military contractors to digitize their old project records for historical preservation. Daniel had applied 6 months earlier, mostly out of boredom. They'd sent him a scanner and simple instructions: catalogue everything, upload what wasn't classified, flag anything that might be. He'd been working through boxes of yellowed documents for weeks: soil composition reports, hand-drawn survey maps, photographs of drilling equipment caked in red desert clay. Most of it was mind-numbingly dull, the kind of technical minutiae that only another engineer could appreciate. But that morning, scanning a stack of Department of Energy environmental cleanup files from a 2025 public records release, his hand stopped moving. The coordinates were unmistakable: 36.9428 degrees north, 106.9931 degrees west. Archuleta Mesa, Dulce, New Mexico. The report was dated February 2025, stamped with multiple agency seals: DOE, Department of Homeland Security, EPA. The language was bureaucratic and vague, designed to bore anyone who bothered reading it. Ground instability due to deep bore tunneling activities, and implementation of biological containment protocols following undisclosed 1979 incident requiring remediation. Daniel read it 3 times, his coffee growing cold in his hand. Biological containment. Archuleta Mesa. He'd been there. He'd been part of whatever this was. Daniel pushed away from his desk and walked to the window. Outside, the morning sun painted the Sacramento mountains in shades of amber and rust. His reflection stared back at him. A lean man with silver hair and sun-weathered skin, eyes still sharp behind wire-rimmed glasses. He looked like someone who'd earned a quiet retirement. He looked like someone who'd successfully buried the past. But memory is a stubborn thing. He returned to his filing cabinets, pulling open drawers he hadn't touched in years. His fingers walked through labelled folders until he found it. A thin accordion file marked LANL, MISC Projects 1978 to 1980. Inside were pay stubs, travel vouchers, equipment requisition forms. But the daily logs from August 1979, the detailed survey notes, the incident reports, the photographs, were gone. He remembered keeping them. He remembered filing them carefully the way he filed everything. But at some point in some year he couldn't quite recall they'd vanished or been taken. Daniel sat back down at his computer and opened his blank document. From memory he began typing: Project Gaslight, August 1979, Archuleta Mesa, Dulce, New Mexico. Team lead, Daniel Reeves. Assignment: Geothermal survey and structural assessment of subsurface cavern system. That was the official story anyway. Part 2. The 1979 operation. The past came back in fragments, sharp and bright against the dark backdrop of forgotten years. Summer 1979. Daniel had been 31 years old, newly married, working contract jobs for Los Alamos National Laboratory. The pay was excellent, the work was interesting, and he had learned not to ask too many questions. When you worked for LANL during the Cold War, you understood that curiosity was a luxury you couldn't afford. The call came in late July. A supervisor Daniel had worked with before, a man named Gordon Voss, asked if he was available for a 6-week project in northern New Mexico. Geothermal assessment, Gordon said. Straightforward drilling and core sampling. The location was remote, the pay was double his usual rate, and secrecy protocols would apply. Daniel said yes, without hesitation. He arrived in Dulce on August 5th, driving a rental truck loaded with seismic equipment and diamond-tipped drill bits. The town was small, quiet, nestled in high desert country, where the Jicarilla Apache Reservation sprawled across mesas and canyons. Archuleta Mesa rose to the north, a massive table of rock and sparse vegetation that looked like a sleeping giant. The project site wasn't in the town proper. Daniel followed dirt roads for another 40 minutes, past cattle gates and washouts, until he reached a temporary encampment. 3 aluminum trailers, 2 industrial generators, and a drilling rig positioned near the base of the mesa. A chain-link fence had been erected around the perimeter, topped with warning signs about blasting zones and geological testing. Gordon Voss was waiting for him, clipboard in hand, looking exactly as Daniel remembered. Stocky, balding, with the permanent squint of someone who'd spent too many years reading technical specifications in bad light. "Right on time," Gordon said, shaking Daniel's hand. "Let me show you what we're working with." Inside the main trailer, geological surveys covered every wall. The maps showed an extensive cave system beneath Archuleta Mesa, tunnels that supposedly connected to an abandoned 1950s nuclear shelter built during the height of Cold War paranoia. The official story was that they were assessing the stability of these tunnels for possible geothermal energy extraction. Daniel nodded along, examining the depth readings and soil composition reports. Everything looked standard, professional, boring. "Any problems?" Daniel asked. Gordon hesitated just for a second. "We've had some unusual readings. Temperature fluctuations, minor seismic activity that doesn't match known fault patterns. Probably nothing, but we need someone with your experience to make sense of it." They started drilling on August 8th. The first week was routine. They expanded an existing shaft, pulling up core samples of sandstone, limestone and volcanic rock. Daniel supervised the drilling crews, adjusted their angle and depth, monitored seismic sensors placed throughout the cave system. Everything proceeded according to plan. The second week things changed. On August 23rd at approximately 2:47 p.m, the temperature sensors spiked. Daniel was in the trailer reviewing data when the alarm went off, a shrill electronic beep that made everyone jump. He rushed outside to the drill site. The rig had stopped. The crew stood back, staring at the shaft opening. One of them, a kid named Tommy who couldn't have been more than 22, looked pale. "Something's wrong with the drill," Tommy said. "It hit resistance at 340 meters, but it's not rock. I don't know what it is." Daniel climbed onto the rig platform and checked the readouts. The drill bit had stopped advancing, but the motor was still pulling full torque. The temperature sensor attached to the bit read 127 degrees Fahrenheit, which was at least 40 degrees hotter than it should have been at that depth. "Pull it up," Daniel ordered, slowly. It took 20 minutes to retract the drill. When the bit finally emerged, everyone went silent. The tungsten carbide tips were scorched black, as if they'd been exposed to extreme heat. But more disturbing was the residue coating the bit, a thick, dark substance that looked organic, almost like tar, except it seemed to shimmer with faint iridescence in the afternoon sun. When Daniel reached out to touch it, Gordon grabbed his wrist. "Don't," Gordon said quietly. That was when Daniel noticed the other men, 3 of them, standing near the fence line watching. They wore civilian clothes, jeans, work boots, plain shirts, but they carried themselves with military precision. Daniel hadn't seen them arrive. Gordon saw Daniel looking. "New safety inspectors," he said too quickly, "from Kirtland Air Force Base. Standard procedure." It wasn't standard procedure. Daniel knew that. But he also knew when to keep his mouth shut. They shut down drilling for the day. Gordon sent the crew back to town while he and Daniel stayed behind to examine the drill bit more carefully. In the trailer with the door closed, Gordon swabbed a sample of the dark residue onto a glass slide and examined it under a portable microscope. "Jesus Christ," Gordon whispered. "What is it?" Gordon didn't answer immediately. He adjusted the microscope focus, his face tight with something Daniel couldn't quite identify. Fear, maybe, or recognition. "It's moving," Gordon finally said, "at the cellular level. This isn't geological, it's biological." Before Daniel could respond, the seismic monitors erupted with activity. The needle on the primary unit swung wildly as a low-frequency vibration rolled through the trailer. Deep, rhythmic, almost like a pulse. The lights flickered. Daniel's coffee cup rattled across the desk. Then, as suddenly as it started, everything stopped. Silence. Gordon and Daniel stared at each other. Outside they could hear the generators humming, the wind moving across the mesa. Everything sounded normal. Daniel walked to the window and looked toward the drill site. The three men from Kirtland were making phone calls, their faces grim. "Gordon," Daniel said slowly, "what are we really drilling for?" Gordon was already packing the microscope away, sealing the sample slide in a plastic evidence bag. His hands shook slightly. "Nothing good," he said. "Nothing good at all." That night Daniel couldn't sleep. He lay in his rented room at the Dulce Motor Lodge, staring at the ceiling, listening to the distant hum of the desert. Around 3 a.m. he heard helicopters. Not the small civilian kind, but heavy military transports, their rotors beating the air like war drums. The next morning, when Daniel arrived at the site, everything had changed. The drilling rig was gone. The trailers were being dismantled. A dozen new personnel had arrived overnight, all wearing black tactical uniforms with no insignia. They'd erected a large military tent over the drill shaft, and armed guards now patrolled the perimeter. Gordon met him at the gate, his face haggard, eyes bloodshot. "Project's over," Gordon said, "effective immediately. You'll be compensated for the full contract period, plus a completion bonus. Sign here." He handed Daniel a stack of documents, non-disclosure agreements, security protocols, a new contract that superseded everything he'd signed before, citing national energy security as the reason for termination. Daniel read through them carefully. The language was dense, threatening. He would never discuss the project, he would never return to the site, he would surrender all notes, photographs and samples. Violation would result in federal prosecution. "What did we find down there?" Daniel asked quietly. Gordon looked at him for a long moment. "Nothing," he said finally. "We found absolutely nothing. That's the official story, and you'd be smart to believe it." Daniel signed the papers. 2 days later, he left Dulce, driving back to Alamogordo with a check for $15,000 and a head full of questions he'd never be able to answer. Within a month, he heard that Tommy, the young driller who'd first noticed something wrong, had died in a hiking accident in the Sangre de Cristo Mountains. Another crew member, a geologist named Patricia Mills, was killed in a car crash on Highway 84. Daniel never spoke to Gordon Voss again, and for 46 years he tried very hard to forget that August in Dulce ever happened. Part 3. The Interference. The retired supervisor living under a new identity wasn't hard to find. Daniel had kept a list, not written down, never written down, but memorised, of everyone he'd worked with during those years. Gordon Voss had been important enough to remember. It took Daniel 3 days of searching, using genealogy databases and property records, before he found a match. Gordon Vance, age 72, living in Montrose, Colorado. The photographs on social media, a Facebook account belonging to Gordon's daughter, showed the same stocky build, the same permanent squint, just older and greyer. Daniel didn't call first. He drove the 6 hours north to Montrose, rehearsing what he'd say, and knocked on the door of a modest bungalow with a well-tended garden and a view of the San Juan Mountains. Gordon answered the door, took one look at Daniel and went pale. "Jesus Christ," Gordon whispered. "You're supposed to be forgetting." "So are you," Daniel said. "Can I come in?" They sat in Gordon's kitchen, drinking coffee that neither of them touched. while Gordon's wife, a pleasant woman named Ruth who had no idea what her husband used to do, ran errands in town. The house was quiet, filled with the comfortable clutter of a long retirement, travel photographs, grandchildren's drawings, a half-finished puzzle on the dining room table. "Why now?" Gordon asked finally. "After all these years, why now?" Daniel slid a printed copy of the DOE report across the table. "Because they're lying. They say it was contained in 1979, but this report mentions ongoing biological containment protocols. Something's still there, Gordon. Something's still active." Gordon read the report slowly, his face unreadable. When he finished, he folded it carefully and pushed it back across the table. "You need to stop," he said. "Right now. Burn this, delete everything on your computer, and forget you ever saw it." "People died," Daniel said. "Tommy, Patricia, maybe others we don't know about. Don't I deserve to know what happened?" "No," Gordon said flatly, "you don't. Because the truth won't set you free, Daniel. It'll get you killed, just like it got them killed. So you're just going to sit here, tend your garden and pretend we didn't see what we saw?" Gordon stood up abruptly, walking to the window. He stood there for a long moment, staring out at the mountains. "They took everything," he said quietly. "Every sample, every photograph, every handwritten note. But they didn't know I'd made copies, backups. Old-school physical backups on punch cards and magnetic tape, stored in a safety deposit box under my mother's maiden name." He turned back to Daniel. "In 1983, I was diagnosed with a brain tumour, stage 3 glioblastoma. The doctors gave me 8 months. I got my affairs in order, wrote letters to my family, prepared to die. Then, 3 days before my first chemotherapy session, the tumour disappeared. Completely. The doctors called it spontaneous remission. A miracle. I called it a message." "From who?" "From whoever wanted to make sure I understood the cost of talking." Daniel felt a chill despite the warmth of the kitchen. "You think they did that to you? Gave you cancer and then took it away?" "I think," Gordon said carefully, "that what we found under our Chuleta Mesa was technology we don't understand, biology we didn't create, and I think the people protecting it will do absolutely anything to keep it secret." He walked to a drawer, pulled out a plastic keycard and set it on the table. It was old, yellowed with age, with a magnetic stripe on one side, printed across the front in faded letters, MARE 12. There's an old Los Alamos data server farm outside Santa Fe. Decommissioned in 1992, but the building's still there, still powered, still mirroring archives from the 1970s and 80s. Nobody remembers it exists. This card will get you inside. "Why are you giving this to me?" Gordon sat back down, and for the first time Daniel saw real fear in his old supervisor's eyes. "Because I'm 72 years old, Daniel. I've had 50 years to make peace with my cowardice, but you still have time to be brave, or stupid. I honestly can't tell which." Daniel took the keycard. "One more thing," Gordon said as Daniel stood to leave. "When you find out what Mare 12 means, when you see what they were really doing down there, don't try to stop it. Don't try to expose it. Just document it and run. Because whatever's growing under that mesa, it's been there longer than both of us. And it'll be there long after we're gone." Part 4, the official story cracks. The Los Alamos data server facility was exactly where Gordon said it would be. A nondescript concrete building off Highway 502, hidden behind a stand of ponderosa pines, and marked only with a faded sign reading LANL Auxiliary Facility 7. The parking lot was empty, the windows dark. According to public records, the building had been sold to a private data storage company in 1998, which had gone bankrupt in 2003. Since then, it had existed in bureaucratic limbo, owned by the government but forgotten by everyone who mattered. Daniel parked his truck at 11 p.m. on a Thursday, when the highway traffic was minimal and the spring night was cold enough to see his breath. He'd brought a flashlight, a digital camera, and Gordon's keycard. His hands shook slightly as he approached the building's side entrance. The keycard worked. The lock clicked, and the door swung open on hinges that barely squeaked. Inside, emergency lighting cast everything in a dim red glow. The facility was larger than it looked from outside. A warren of corridors lined with server racks, many of them still humming with power. The air smelled like dust and ozone. Daniel found the terminal station in what must have been the main control room. 3 monitors sat on a metal desk, their screens dark. He pressed the power button on the centre monitor and waited. The system booted up, displaying a command line interface straight out of 1982. Green text on a black screen. No mouse, no icons, just a blinking cursor waiting for input. Daniel pulled out a folded piece of paper where he'd written notes from his conversation with Gordon. He typed carefully, "Access Mare 12. The screen flickered. A password prompt appeared. Gordon had written this down too, though he'd warned Daniel it might not work after 40 years. Daniel typed "Gaslight. Archive, 1979. For several seconds, nothing happened. Then the screen cleared, and folders began appearing, dozens of them, organised by date and project code. Daniel opened the folder labelled Biological Event Site D. What he found made his stomach clench. Scanned documents, laboratory reports, thermal imaging, and photographs. Dozens of high-resolution photographs taken inside the tunnel system beneath Archuleta Mesa. The first image showed a cross-section of tunnel wall, magnified to show the rock face in detail. What Daniel had initially thought was a natural geological formation wasn't natural at all. Embedded in the stone was something organic. Tissue, or what looked like tissue, forming intricate networks that resembled nerve pathways. The structures were dark, almost black, shot through with veins of metallic sheen that caught the camera flash like circuitry. Another photograph showed a larger section of tunnel. Here the growth was more extensive, covering entire wall sections in sprawling patterns that looked almost deliberate, intentional, as if the material was following some internal blueprint. Daniel scrolled through more images, his sense of unreality growing with each one. Core samples showing biological material fused directly to silicon and metal. Microscope slides revealing cellular structures that seemed to combine organic and inorganic elements. Temperature readings showing localized heat signatures that didn't correspond to any known geological process. Then he found the video file. It was short, less than 3 minutes, and the quality was poor, recorded on what must have been an early digital camera. The footage showed the interior of a tunnel, illuminated by portable work lights. A voice off camera, Daniel thought it might be Gordon's, 40 years younger, provided narration. August 24th, 1979, primary shaft, level 3. We've isolated a section approximately 12 metres into the western branch. You can see the material coating the walls. Initial analysis suggests a form of biofilm, but the structure is far more complex. Notice the metallic striations. Those aren't mineral deposits. They appear to be conducting electrical current. The camera moved closer to the wall. In the harsh light, the tissue-metal hybrid material seemed to pulse faintly, as if responding to the nearby humans. Temperature reading is 112 degrees Fahrenheit, 20 degrees above baseline. The material appears to be generating its own heat. We're also detecting low-frequency electromagnetic emissions. The pattern is unusual. The camera operator zoomed in on a particularly dense cluster of the growth. For just a moment, Daniel thought he saw something beneath the surface. Shapes that might have been cellular structures, or might have been something else, something that looked almost like letters, or numbers, or code. Then the video cut to black. An audio file began playing automatically. A man's voice, official and clipped. Containment breach forecast in 44 years. Recommend implementation of long-term monitoring protocols and preparedness for large-scale quarantine measures. Material demonstrates adaptive properties. Continued growth trajectory suggests surface exposure event by 2023. The file ended. Daniel sat back, his heart pounding. 2023, 2 years ago. He opened another folder, this one labelled Personnel Notes. Inside were psychological evaluations, medical records, security clearance reviews. He found his own file, A single page noting that Daniel Reeves had performed adequately under pressure and posed minimal security risk. But there were other files, thicker ones. Files for people Daniel didn't recognise, marked with red stamps. Compromised, discontinued, neutralised. He was about to close the folder when a new window appeared on the screen, unbidden. Text began scrolling across the display. Unauthorised access detected. Security protocol Mayor 12 activated. This terminal has been logged. Please remain where you are. Daniel didn't remain where he was. He grabbed his camera, ejected the storage device from the terminal and ran. Behind him, he heard the building's security system come alive. Locks engaging, alarms beginning to sound. He hit the exit door at full speed, crashed through into the cold night and sprinted to his truck. He was 3 miles down Highway 502 before he allowed himself to breathe. Part 5. The Descent. Daniel drove straight to Dulce, arriving just after dawn. The town looked exactly as he remembered it. Small, quiet, suspended in time. He checked into the same motor lodge where he'd stayed in 1979, requesting a room in the back where his truck wouldn't be visible from the road. He needed help. He needed someone who wouldn't dismiss what he'd found. Someone with the resources and credibility to investigate further. Someone with nothing to lose. He found that person at the Dulce family restaurant eating breakfast alone at a corner booth. Erin Blevins was 34 years old, a freelance investigative reporter who'd made a name for herself, exposing environmental violations and government corruption throughout the Southwest. Daniel had found her articles online during his drive. Pieces about contaminated water supplies near Los Alamos, unexplained increases in cancer rates downwind from White Sands Missile Range, mysterious land purchases by shell corporations linked to defence contractors. She had short dark hair, sharp eyes, and the wary demeanour of someone who had been threatened enough times to take threats seriously. Daniel sat down across from her without asking. "Miss Blevins," he said quietly, "my name is Daniel Reeves, and I have evidence of an ongoing biological contamination event under Archuleta Mesa that the government has been covering up for 46 years. I'm either crazy, or you're about to break the biggest story of your career." To her credit, Erin didn't call security. She studied Daniel for a long moment, then set down her fork. "Show me," she said. They spent the next 2 hours in Daniel's motel room, reviewing everything. The DOE report, Gordon's keycard, the photographs Daniel had taken of the Los Alamos service screen. Daniel told her about 1979, about the drilling operation, about Tommy and Patricia and everyone else who died or disappeared. Erin listened without interrupting, taking notes in a worn leather journal. When Daniel finished, she sat back and exhaled slowly. "I've been tracking unexplained Department of Energy spending in this region for 3 years, she said. Budget line items that don't match any official projects. Equipment purchases that disappear into classified programs. In 2019, Homeland Security authorized construction of what they called a seismic monitoring station, built directly into Archuleta Mesa. The contract went to a private military contractor called Helix Solutions. The project budget was $47 million for a monitoring station." "That's a lot for seismographs," Daniel said. "Exactly. And here's the interesting part. Helix Solutions was founded in 2017 by former DARPA scientists specializing in biotechnology and materials science. Why would a biotech company be building earthquake monitors?" She opened her laptop and showed Daniel satellite imagery of Archuleta Mesa, dated from various years. The most recent, from 2024, showed a cluster of new buildings on the northern slope, white prefab structures arranged in a defensive perimeter, with a large ventilation array visible near the mesa's summit. "I tried to visit last year," Erin continued. "Got stopped at a checkpoint 2 miles out. Federal agents, not local police. They were polite but very clear. This was restricted land, and I needed to leave immediately. When I filed a Freedom of Information Act request, they sent me a 3-page document that was 90% redacted." Daniel leaned forward. "Can you get us in there?" "Maybe. I still have valid press credentials, and technically the access road is on Jicarilla Apache land, which means tribal law applies. I have a contact who might help." She paused. But if we do this, you understand we're committing multiple federal crimes? I'm 67 years old, Daniel said. I've spent 46 years being careful. I'm tired of being careful. Erin smiled for the first time. Good. Let me make some calls. The contact was a Yicarilla Apache rancher named Joseph Quintana, a man in his late 50s with weathered hands and eyes that missed nothing. He met them that evening at his ranch, 10 miles southwest of town, where the mesa rose against the darkening sky like a monument to secrets. My grandfather worked on the original shelter project in the 1950s, Joseph said, pouring coffee in his kitchen. He never talked about what he saw down there, but he warned us to stay away from the mesa. Said the earth underneath wasn't right, wasn't clean. Have you noticed anything unusual? Erin asked. Recently, I mean. Joseph nodded. Helicopters, 2-3 times a week, flying in after midnight, heavy transports military grade, and the cattle. He walked to the window, gesturing toward his pastures. I've lost 23 head in the last 4 years. Found them in the morning, just lying dead in the field. No wounds, no signs of predators, but they were different. Drained. Like something had taken all the water out of them. The vet couldn't explain it. Said maybe it was a virus, but he'd never seen anything like it. And the ground hums, Daniel said, remembering what he'd read online. Yes, low frequency, usually around 3 a.m. It stops during electrical blackouts, which doesn't make sense if it's geological. Something powered is making that sound. Something big. Joseph agreed to show them the access road that night. They drove in his truck, lights off, navigating by moonlight along dirt roads that wound through pinyon forest and high desert scrub. Eventually, they reached a ridge overlooking the northern approach to the mesa. Below them, Daniel could see the facility, a cluster of illuminated buildings surrounded by chain-link fence topped with razor wire. Guard towers, patrol vehicles. What Erin had called a seismic monitoring station looked more like a military forward operating base. There's a service entrance on the east side, Joseph said, handing Erin a hand-drawn map. Old access tunnel from the 1950s shelter project. Most people don't know it exists, but it's still passable. The gate has a keypad lock, 0726. They haven't changed it in 20 years because they think nobody knows about it. Why are you helping us? Daniel asked. Joseph was quiet for a moment. Because my grandson is sick. Leukemia. He's 8 years old. 3 other children in Dulcie have the same diagnosis, all in the last 2 years. The government says it's coincidence. I think it's poison. I think something is leaking out of that mesa, and they know it, and they're letting it happen anyway. He looked at Daniel directly. So you go down there, and you find out what they're hiding, and then you tell everyone. You make sure the whole world knows. Part 6. The Erasure. They went in at 2 a.m. when the guard rotations changed and the night was darkest. Erin drove, her car a nondescript sedan that wouldn't draw attention. Daniel navigated using Joseph's map and his own memories of the terrain from 46 years ago. The service entrance was exactly where Joseph had indicated. A rusted metal door built into the mesa's rock face, camouflaged by scrub brush and decades of neglect. The keypad was ancient, its numbers worn smooth by weather and time. Daniel entered the code, 0-7-2-6. The lock clicked. Inside, the tunnel smelled like damp earth and electricity. They used headlamps to navigate, following a descending passageway that had been carved through solid rock. The walls showed tool marks from the 1950s, pickaxes and jackhammers, long before modern excavation equipment. Every 50 feet, bare bulbs hung from the ceiling, providing minimal light. After 10 minutes of walking, they reached a newer section. The rough-hewn tunnel gave way to smooth concrete walls, fluorescent lighting, and steel doors marked with modern security placards. "This is recent construction," Erin whispered. "Within the last few years." They passed through 2 more security doors, both unlocked, either through negligence or because the facility staff didn't expect anyone to use this entrance. Eventually they found what they were looking for. A freight elevator with a control panel showing buttons for levels descending far deeper than any geological survey should require. Sub-level 1, sub-level 2, sub-level 3, down to sub-level 12. Mare 12, Daniel said quietly. They descended. The elevator took nearly 3 minutes to reach the bottom, the cables creaking and groaning. When the doors finally opened, they stepped out into a world that shouldn't exist. The chamber was enormous, easily the size of an aircraft hangar carved from living rock. But the walls weren't bare stone anymore. They were covered, floor to ceiling, with the same material Daniel had seen in those 1979 photographs, organic tissue fused with metal, spreading in vast networks that pulsed with faint bioluminescence. Blues and greens and deep purples, like deep sea creatures adapted to permanent darkness. The material was everywhere, growing across the walls, the ceiling, the floor. In some places it had formed thick cables that resembled nerve bundles or power conduits, impossible to tell which. The air was warm, humid, and smelled faintly of copper, and something else Daniel couldn't identify. Something organic. "My God," Erin breathed. They walked carefully across the chamber, following what looked like a maintenance corridor. Abandoned equipment lay scattered around, drilling rigs, excavation tools, scientific instruments, all of them partially consumed by the growth. In places, the metal had fused directly to the biological material, creating hybrid structures that seemed both technological and alive. Daniel touched one of the wall growth gently. It was warm, and it responded to his touch, brightening slightly, as if acknowledging his presence. "It's aware," he whispered. They found the maintenance bay in a side chamber, a sealed room with thick plastic sheeting hanging in strips across the entrance. A faded hazard placard hung on the door, property of United States Air Force. Project Mare 12. Biotech Containment Zone. Authorized personnel only. Inside, the room had been converted into a laboratory, or perhaps a morgue. Stainless steel tables, medical equipment, containment pods lined against the far wall, each one approximately the size of a human being. Most of the pods were empty, but one, in the corner, was not. Daniel approached slowly, his heart hammering. Through the transparent upper section of the pod, he could see what was inside. It had been human once, perhaps in 1979, perhaps earlier. Now it was something else, a body that had been partially transformed, consumed, integrated into the same material that covered the walls, bones visible through translucent tissue, metallic structures growing through the skeleton like circuit boards through flesh. The face was still recognizable, preserved in a rictus of frozen agony or ecstasy. Impossible to tell which. The eyes were open, and they were watching. "Jesus Christ," Erin said. She'd raised her phone, recording video. "Daniel, this is what we found in 1979, Daniel finished. This is what they've been protecting. Not alien technology, not foreign weapons. US, our own creation. Synthetic biology that learned to think, to grow, to consume." He moved to another table where documents lay in plastic sleeves, research notes, experimental protocols. He scanned them quickly, his engineering background making sense of the technical language. Project Mare 12 had begun in 1967, according to the dates on the earliest documents. A joint venture between DARPA and the Air Force, attempting to create self-repairing materials for deep space construction. Biological compounds that could survive extreme environments, grow and adapt without human intervention, merge with existing structures to create hybrid systems stronger than anything humanity could engineer alone. The experiments had been conducted here in secret, in tunnels that already existed beneath Archuleta Mesa. And they had worked. The material had grown, adapted, evolved. It had also learned to incorporate anything it touched, including the scientists who created it. Daniel found a core sample sitting on one of the tables, sealed in a transparent containment tube. The material inside still pulsed with faint warmth, even after decades. He slipped it into his jacket pocket. "We need to go," he said. "Now." They hurried back through the chamber toward the elevator, but as they approached, the lights flickered. The bioluminescent growth on the walls brightened suddenly, illuminating the entire space in eerie blue-green light. And beneath their feet, Daniel felt it, that same rhythmic vibration he'd experienced in 1979. A pulse, like a heartbeat. The elevator doors opened before they reached them. Two men in a tactical gear stepped out, weapons holstered but visible. Behind them, a third figure, older, wearing a suit despite the underground location. He looked at Daniel and Erin with the weary expression of someone who'd dealt with this situation before. "Mr. Reeves," the man said calmly, "we've been expecting you since you accessed the Los Alamos archive 3 days ago." They were escorted to the surface, driven in a black SUV to a nondescript office building in Albuquerque, and placed in separate interview rooms. Daniel sat alone for 6 hours before anyone spoke to him. The man in the suit finally entered, carrying a thin folder. "My name is irrelevant," he said, sitting across from Daniel. "What matters is that you understand something crucial. You didn't find aliens, Mr. Reeves. You found us. A part of us we were never meant to create." "Then why hide it?" Daniel demanded. "If this is just a failed experiment—" "Failed?" The man laughed bitterly. "Mare 12 is the most successful experiment in human history. That material down there is smarter than we are. It's been growing, learning, evolving for 50 years. It understands physics we haven't discovered yet. Is rewriting its own genetic code. Is dreaming, Mr. Reeves. And we have no idea what it's dreaming about." He opened the folder, showing Daniel satellite thermal images of Archuleta Mesa. The entire underground system glowed with heat signatures forming patterns too complex to be random. "We can't stop it. We can only slow it down, contain it, study it. Because one day, maybe in 10 years, maybe in 50, it's going to reach the surface. And when it does, it will change everything. The question isn't whether humanity survives. It's whether we deserve to." The man stood. "You'll be released in 48 hours with no record of this conversation. Your friend Miss Blevins has already been released. Her footage was corrupted during the upload. A tragic technical failure. You're both free to live your lives. We recommend you do so quietly." Daniel was driven back to Dulce 2 days later and dropped at his truck. Erin was gone. Her phone went straight to voicemail. Her social media accounts went dark. Her apartment in Santa Fe was empty, lease terminated. 1 month later, a sealed envelope arrived at Daniel's house with no return address. Inside was a single printed photograph, a frame from Erin's deleted footage. It showed the containment pod clearly, a hybrid human thing suspended inside. But this version of the image was closer, more detailed. And in the reflection of the pod's transparent surface, visible in perfect clarity, was another figure, standing behind the pod, watching the camera, watching Daniel and Erin. It was vaguely humanoid, but wrong in ways Daniel's brain struggled to process. Tall and thin, with too many joints. Its surface seemed to shift between organic tissue and metallic structure, never settling on either. And its eyes, if they were eyes, glowed with the same bioluminescent blue-green as the walls. Written on the back of the photograph in neat handwriting, "It sees you now. It remembers." Part 7. The Silent Renewal. 6 months passed. The Department of Energy issued a press release announcing the controlled demolition and environmental remediation of unstable underground structures beneath Archuleta Mesa. The operation was completed in October 2025, they said. The area was now safe, sealed, contained. Daniel watched the news from his home in Alamogordo. He saw the footage of trucks hauling away debris, officials in hard hats giving interviews about geological stability and public safety. Everything looked professional, convincing, final. But he knew better. The satellite imagery told a different story. New construction had begun on the mesa within weeks of the supposed demolition. Not demolition equipment, but infrastructure. Massive ventilation arrays, power substations capable of supporting a small city, concrete reinforcement structures that looked less like containment and more like preparation. and the hum had returned. Joseph Quintana called Daniel in December. His voice was tight with barely controlled fear. "It's louder than before," Joseph said. "The hum. It used to stop around dawn. Now it goes all day. My grandson," his voice broke, "his cancer's in remission. The doctors say it's impossible, that leukemia doesn't just disappear like this. But 3 other sick children in Dulce are also in remission, all of them at the same time." "That's good news," Daniel said carefully. "Is it?" Joseph asked, "or is something down there changing them? Rewriting them? My grandson says he dreams about blue light and being connected to something vast. He's 8 years old, Daniel. What kind of dreams are those?" Daniel didn't have an answer. He sat in his workshop that night, unable to sleep, listening to his old seismometer, the same equipment he'd used in 1979, never quite able to throw it away. He'd set it up weeks ago, pointing the sensors north toward Dulce, 120 miles away. The signal was there, faint but unmistakable, a rhythmic pulse, deep and slow, 1 beat every 1.3 seconds, the exact rhythm of a resting human heartbeat. Daniel opened his laptop and pulled up the core sample data he'd photographed at Los Alamos, the growth projections, the containment breach forecast. The calculations had predicted surface exposure by 2023. It was now 2025. Whatever was under Archuleta Mesa had already reached the surface. It was already spreading, and the government wasn't fighting it anymore. They were managing it, controlling the narrative, preparing the world for something they could no longer prevent. Daniel thought about the photograph, the creature standing in the reflection, watching. He thought about Gordon's miracle recovery from cancer. He thought about Joseph's grandson and the other children, suddenly healed by something that grew in darkness beneath the earth. Mare 12 wasn't killing people anymore. It was helping them, changing them, preparing them. For what, Daniel didn't know. Perhaps no one did. Perhaps even the thing itself didn't fully understand what it was becoming. He saved his files to 3 separate encrypted drives and mailed them to addresses around the country. Insurance, in case someone decided he'd become too dangerous to ignore. Then he poured himself a glass of whiskey and walked outside. The desert night was cold and clear, stars sharp as broken glass. To the north, toward Dulce, Daniel thought he could see a faint glow on the horizon. It might have been light pollution from Albuquerque. It might have been something else. The seismometer in his workshop continued its steady rhythm. 1 beat, then another, like a heart, like a promise, like a countdown. Daniel raised his glass to the distant mesa and whispered, "God help us all." The stars didn't answer. But somewhere beneath the earth, in chambers carved from living rock, something that had once been an experiment and was now something far more continued its patient, inexorable work, growing, learning, dreaming, and waiting. Have you ever wondered why ancient monuments across the globe seem to align with mathematical precision? Why your GPS glitches in certain locations? Or why governments classify research about electromagnetic anomalies? Tonight's story might make you question every map you've ever trusted. Before we begin this journey into the hidden grid beneath our feet, I want to thank M10rapin for suggesting this topic. Your video ideas fuel these late-night tales, so please leave your suggestions in the comments below. And if you're ready to uncover the mysteries that keep you awake at night, make sure to like and subscribe to Sleep Theories. Now, dim your lights, settle in, and prepare to discover the truth about the lines that connect our world. My name is Alex Morrison, and I used to believe maps told the truth. As a GIS analyst, that's Geographic Information Systems for those who don't spend their days staring at satellite data and topographical overlays, I thought I understood how the world was organised. Cities here, mountains there, rivers cutting through valleys in predictable patterns carved by millions of years of erosion. Everything had a logical explanation. Everything could be mapped, measured and catalogued. That was before I found the pattern. It started innocently enough. Tuesday morning, October 15th, 8:47 a.m. I was hunched over my dual monitors in a cramped office in Brussels, working for Steinberg Construction Consortium. They'd hired me to evaluate potential sites for a new high-speed rail corridor that would connect Prague to Paris. part of the EU's Green Transportation Initiative. Routine work, overlay environmental data, check for protected sites, identify geological challenges. I'd done it 100 times before, but this time something was different. I was cross-referencing archaeological databases with our proposed route when I noticed it. A series of Neolithic monuments, stone circles, burial mounds, ancient wells, formed an almost perfect line across the landscape. Not just a few sites clustered together, but dozens of them, stretching for hundreds of miles. The proposed railway cut directly across this invisible corridor. At first, I laughed it off. Pattern recognition gone wild, I told myself. The human brain loves to find connections where none exist. But then I pulled up the magnetic anomaly data from the European Space Agency's swarm satellites. The coffee mug slipped from my hand, shattering on the floor. The magnetic variations followed the exact same line. Every single monument sat on a point of electromagnetic disturbance. The precision was impossible. We're talking about structures built 5,000 years apart by cultures that supposedly never interacted, aligned to within meters of a magnetic corridor that modern science had only just detected. I should have deleted the file, should have marked the route as approved and moved on with my life. Instead, I zoomed out. The line didn't stop at the edge of my survey area. It continued east through Romania, Turkey, Iran, west through England, across the Atlantic. I pulled up global archaeological databases, my fingers trembling as I plotted point after point. Stonehenge, Avebury, the Externstein, the Oracle at Delphi. Each site fell perfectly along extended trajectories of the same geometric pattern. My phone buzzed. A text from my supervisor. "Morrison, railway assessment due by noon. Stop whatever rabbit hole you're going down." But I couldn't stop. I'd found something that shouldn't exist. A planetary grid mapped by ancient peoples who supposedly thought the Earth was flat, following electromagnetic patterns we'd only discovered in the last century. Either I was losing my mind or I'd stumbled onto the greatest archaeological discovery of the millennium. I chose to believe the latter. That was my first mistake. 3 weeks later, I stood in a frost-covered field 40 kilometres outside Prague, watching my equipment fail in ways that defied every principle of engineering I knew. After discovering the alignment, I'd convinced Steinberg to let me conduct field surveys along the proposed route. Geological stability assessment, I'd called it. What I really wanted was to stand on one of these intersection points myself, to take readings that might explain how ancient peoples had detected magnetic anomalies without compasses or magnetometers. The morning had started normally enough. I'd parked my van on a dirt road near the village of Holubice, unloaded my survey equipment, and hiked 2 kilometres to the first monument site, a circle of weathered standing stones that locals called Devil's Dance. The temperature hovered just above freezing, and mist clung to the valleys like cotton wool. I set up my differential GPS unit first, waiting for it to lock onto satellites. The device chirped, showing full signal strength. Then, as I walked toward the centre of the stone circle, the screen flickered. Acquiring satellites. Signal lost. Acquiring satellites. I checked my phone. Same problem. The GPS app showed my location jumping wildly, placing me first in Prague, then Vienna, then somehow in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. My professional-grade survey unit, accurate to within centimetres under normal conditions, couldn't even determine which continent I was on. The electromagnetic field meter came next. The moment I switched it on, the needle slammed against the maximum reading and stayed there, quivering like it was fighting against invisible restraints. I'd seen similar readings near power lines or transformer stations, but we were in the middle of farmland. The nearest electrical infrastructure was kilometres away. You shouldn't be here. I spun around. An elderly woman stood at the edge of the field, wrapped in a thick wool shawl. Her face was deeply lined, her eyes the pale blue of winter sky. "I'm sorry," I called out in my broken Czech. She switched to accented English. "This place. It's not for outsiders, not for their machines." She gestured at my equipment with a gnarled finger. "I'm just conducting surveys for the railway," I explained, walking toward her, "making sure the ground is stable." She laughed, but there was no humour in it. Stable? This line has been here since before the first stones were raised, before your railways, before your cities. Our ancestors knew to respect it, to build their monuments as, Exotica, anchors, to keep the energy flowing properly. Energy? I pulled out my tablet, showing her the magnetic anomaly map. You mean this? You know about the electromagnetic patterns? Her eyes widened. For a moment she looked genuinely frightened. You've mapped it. The whole grid? She grabbed my arm with surprising strength. You must stop. Some knowledge isn't meant to be documented. They will come for you if you continue. Who will come? But she was already walking away, moving faster than seemed possible for someone her age. The ones who already know, she called back. The ones who've always known. I wanted to follow her, to demand answers, but my drone chose that moment to fall out of the sky. No warning, no gradual descent. 1 second it was hovering steadily. The next it dropped like a stone, smashing into the frozen ground 20 metres away. As I ran to retrieve it, I noticed something through the trees, a structure that didn't belong. Hidden behind a thick stand of pines was a concrete building, brutalist in design, with narrow windows like suspicious eyes. Military architecture, Cold War era by the look of it. The smart thing would have been to leave immediately. Instead, I collected my broken drone and hiked toward the building. The structure was abandoned but not ancient. Rust streaked the metal door, which hung open on failing hinges. Inside, fluorescent lights dangled from exposed wiring, and the walls were covered in mould that formed patterns like continental drift. But it was the maps that stopped me cold. The entire north wall was covered in them. Topographical maps, geological surveys, electromagnetic readings, layers upon layers of data, some dating back to the 1960s. Red strings connected pins at various locations, creating a web that stretched across Europe. And running through it all, marked in thick black ink, was the same line I'd found. The same impossible alignment. In the corner, barely legible, someone had written, Earth Grid Project, classified, destroy after review. I pulled out my phone to photograph everything, but the camera wouldn't focus. Every image came out distorted, as if the very air in the room was bending light. I tried sketching what I saw instead, my hands shaking from more than cold. A metal filing cabinet in the corner had been forced open, its contents mostly removed or destroyed, but wedged behind the bottom drawer I found a single folder. Water damage had made most of it illegible, but I could make out fragments. Electromagnetic conductivity peaks at intersection points. Ancient structures appear to function as regulatory nodes. Catastrophic potential if grid destabilizes. Project terminated by Joint Commission directive. The last page was a photograph, grainy but unmistakable. It showed a massive antenna array in what looked like Alaska, the same distinctive design I'd seen in conspiracy documentaries about HAARP. But this photo was dated 1971, decades before HAARP officially existed. A sound outside made me freeze. The crunch of footsteps on frost. Multiple sets, moving with military precision. I shoved the folder inside my jacket and slipped out the back window, dropping into a thorny hedge that tore at my clothes. Through the trees, I could see dark vehicles pulling up to the building, men in unmarked uniforms spreading out to surround it. I ran, not toward my van, they'd certainly have someone watching it, but deeper into the forest, following a deer trail that wound toward the next village. Behind me I heard shouting in a language I didn't recognise. Not Czech, not German, something else. It took me 4 hours to circle back to my vehicle, approaching from the opposite direction through farmland. The van was untouched, but I knew they'd let me go. Let me run. They wanted to see what I'd do next, who I'd contact. As I drove away, hand steady on the wheel despite the adrenaline coursing through my veins, I realised the old woman had been right. Some knowledge wasn't meant to be documented, but it was too late now. I'd seen the grid, seen evidence that governments knew about it, had studied it, had classified it, and I was going to find out why. My apartment in Brussels became a command centre for obsession. After the encounter at Holubici, I'd returned to work, filed a bland report recommending further geological assessment, and pretended everything was normal. But every evening, I locked my door, pulled the blinds and dove deeper into the mystery. The coffee table disappeared under printed maps. The walls became a spider web of string and pins connecting sites across continents. I'd stopped sleeping more than 3 hours a night, surviving on espresso and the electric thrill of discovery. The pattern was everywhere once you knew how to look. Start with the obvious ones, the monuments everyone knows, the pyramids of Giza, Stonehenge, Machu Picchu, Easter Island. Plot them on a globe, not a flat map, and they formed geometric relationships so precise they could have been placed by satellite guidance. The Great Pyramid sits at the exact centre of Earth's landmass. Easter Island is antipodal to the Indus Valley civilization sites. Angkor Wat, the Nazca Lines, and Easter Island form a perfect Great Circle route, but those were just the famous nodes. The real revelation came when I started plotting lesser-known sites. Every major ancient city sat on the grid. Babylon, Persepolis, Constantinople, Carthage, all built at intersection points where multiple energy lines converged. The Romans, master engineers, had built their road system following these same invisible highways. The Silk Road traced a major east-west corridor. Even modern cities clustered around the same points: New York, London, Tokyo, Cairo. It wasn't random. It couldn't be. I pulled declassified documents from every database I could access. The US Freedom of Information Act, the UK National Archives, leaked Soviet files from the fall of the USSR. Most of it was useless. Budget reports, personnel transfers, bureaucratic minutiae. But buried in the noise were fragments of something bigger. Project Stargate, the CIA's remote viewing program, included maps marking psychic hotspots that matched my grid lines perfectly. Operation Paperclip scientists had studied Earth radiation patterns in the 1950s. The Soviets had run something called Program Sputnik Grid that involved placing sensors at ancient monument sites across their territory. The most intriguing find came from a 1962 Canadian military report about the construction of the DEW line, the distant early warning radar system across the Arctic. An engineer named Captain Lawrence Brennan had noted persistent electromagnetic anomalies at certain locations that required special shielding for equipment. His proposed sites for radar stations, plotted on my grid, formed a perfect arc along a major ley line. But the document that changed everything was a leaked memo from 1997, source unknown, that had circulated on conspiracy forums before being scrubbed from most of the internet. I found it cached on an obscure Russian server. 2. Joint Chiefs Special Projects Division Aura. Earth grid stability concerns. Recent seismic activity correlates with disruption of natural electromagnetic corridors via urban development and mineral extraction. Recommendation: establish monitoring stations at key intersection points under cover of telecommunications infrastructure. See attached list of priority sites. The attached list was gone, but the implication was clear. They knew. The military, the intelligence agencies, the energy companies, they all knew about the grid, and they were using it. I started mapping modern installations against the ley lines. The correlation was undeniable. HARP in Alaska, ISCAT in Norway, Sura in Russia, Arecibo in Puerto Rico. Every major ionospheric research facility sat directly on an intersection point. The Large Hadron Collider at CERN traced a circle around one of the most powerful convergent zones in Europe. Nuclear power plants clustered along the lines. Major military bases were built at intersection points. Even the routes of underground fibre optic cables followed the ancient paths, as if modern engineers were unconsciously drawn to the same energy corridors their ancestors had marked with standing stones. My phone rang at 3 a.m. on a Tuesday. Unknown number. Stop digging. The voice was electronically distorted, genderless. Who is this? Someone trying to help you. You found the grid. Congratulations. Now forget about it before you end up like the others. What others? Bruce Cathy, John Michel, Ivan Sanderson, all the researchers who got too close to the truth, Heart attacks, car accidents, sudden illnesses. Very convenient. My blood chilled. I knew those names. Independent researchers from the 60s and 70s who'd written about Earth energy grids all died relatively young under questionable circumstances. Why are you warning me? Because the grid is destabilising. The ancients built monuments as regulators, keeping the energy in balance. Modern construction is disrupting the flow. Mumbai, 2006. Haiti, 2010. Fukushima, 2011. Those weren't random natural disasters. They were pressure releases along fractured ley lines. That's impossible. Electromagnetic fields don't cause earthquakes. The voice laughed, bitter and electronic. The electromagnetic fields are just what we can measure. The grid is deeper than that. It's the planet's nervous system, its circulation, and we're giving it a stroke, one skyscraper at a time. Then we need to warn people. With what evidence? Mystical energy lines, ancient wisdom. You'll be dismissed as a crackpot. Unless ... The voice paused. Unless you can prove the energy is real, measurable, usable. How? Return to the grid, not with standard equipment. That's designed to filter out the frequencies you need to detect. Build your own sensor. Copper coils, crystal oscillators, very specific specifications. I'm sending you the plans now. My laptop pinged with an encrypted file. One more thing, the voice said. When you record the surge, you'll have about 6 hours before they track the signature back to you. Use that time wisely. The line went dead. I opened the file. The schematic looked like something Tesla might have designed after a fever dream. Multiple copper coils in a complex geometric arrangement, connected to crystal oscillators and frequency analyzers. The materials list was surprisingly mundane. Everything available from electronic suppliers. It took me 3 days to build it, working in secret in a rented storage unit outside the city. The device looked like abstract art more than scientific equipment, all gleaming copper spirals and crystal matrices. But when I powered it on, every LED lit up green. It was detecting something. Now I just had to be crazy enough to test it. The academic forum was my first mistake. Well, second, if you count building the sensor. But hubris makes fools of us all. And I needed someone, anyone, to verify I wasn't losing my mind. Geoanomalies.net was a small community, mostly graduate students and professional geologists sharing unusual findings. I created a throwaway account and posted a conservative summary. Electromagnetic anomalies correlating with ancient monument placement, seeking peer review. I attached 3 images, my overlay map of European sites, a graph showing magnetic field fluctuations, and 1 photo from the abandoned military outpost with the classified stamps carefully cropped out. Within an hour, I had 2 responses. A geology professor from Munich confirmed similar observations near Bronze Age sites. A student from Oxford posted links to academic papers about telluric currents, natural electrical currents that flow through the Earth's crust. Then, 90 minutes after posting, my thread vanished. Not deleted with a removed by moderator message. Gone, like it had never existed. The cached version on Google disappeared. The other users who'd responded found their comments erased from their own post histories. My laptop screen flickered. A chat window opened without my input. Admin. Your recent activity has been flagged for review. Me. What activity? Who is this? Admin. Consider this a courtesy warning. Cease your current research immediately. Me. Or what? Admin. Or we stop being courteous. The chat window closed itself. When I tried to screenshot the conversation, my laptop blue-screened. It took 20 minutes to restart, and when it did, my hard drive had been wiped. Not formatted, wiped. Every sector overwritten with random data multiple times. A technique that made recovery impossible. Thank God for cloud backups, I thought, logging into my secure server. Empty. 3 years of research, gone. Even my email accounts had been purged. I still had physical copies of the most important findings, hidden in a safety deposit box across town. But the message was clear. They could reach me anywhere, any time. The next morning I arrived at work to find my keycard deactivated. Security escorted me to a conference room where my supervisor, Mr. Steinberg himself, sat with two people I'd never seen before. A woman in a severe black suit and a man who looked like he'd been carved from granite, both with a kind of posture that screamed military. "Alex," Steinberg began, sweating despite the air conditioning. "These representatives from the European Infrastructure Security Division have some concerns about your recent surveys." I'd never heard of the European Infrastructure Security Division. I doubted it existed on any official registry. The woman smiled without warmth. "Mr. Morrison, your work on the railway project has been exemplary. However, we've noticed some unusual patterns in your research that fall outside the project's scope." "I'm thorough," I said. "I investigate all factors that might affect construction, including archaeological sites hundreds of kilometres from the proposed route." The man's accent was impossible to place. "Including electromagnetic phenomena that have no bearing on rail safety." "I believe they do have bearing. What you believe is irrelevant." The woman pulled out a tablet showing my deleted forum post. "Discussing classified military research on public forums is a serious offence." "Classified? I found those maps in an abandoned..." "Mr. Morrison," her voice could have frozen helium, "you're being terminated from this project, effective immediately. Your severance package is generous, contingent on signing this NDA." She slid a document across the table. "You'll cease all research related to electromagnetic anomalies, ancient monuments, or what you call ley lines. Any violation will result in prosecution under the European Security Act." I looked at Steinberg. He wouldn't meet my eyes. "And if I refuse?" The man leaned forward. "Your visa expires in 6 weeks. Your bank accounts are already frozen pending investigation of potential fraud. Your academic credentials are under review. Would you like me to continue?" The threat was clear. Sign and walk away with something or lose everything and possibly face imprisonment. I signed. They confiscated my company laptop, my access badges, even my parking pass. The woman handed me a business card with no name, just a phone number. "If you remember any details you'd like to share about your research, call this number. We reward cooperation." I was escorted out of the building like a criminal, my colleagues staring as security watched me pack my desk. The personal items fit in a single cardboard box: a coffee mug, some photos, a stress ball shaped like Earth. They even checked those before letting me leave. On the tram ride home, I noticed the man 3 seats back. Grey coat, newspaper held too high, wearing sunglasses despite the overcast sky. When I got off 2 stops early, he followed. When I ducked into a cafe, he positioned himself across the street. They were watching me. Fine, let them watch. That night I made a decision. If they wanted to threaten me, surveil me, erase my work, they'd already shown their hand. Whatever was hidden in the Earth's electromagnetic grid was important enough to destroy careers over, which meant it was important enough to risk everything to expose. I had one advantage. The sensor I'd built was hidden in the storage unit, registered under a false name paid in cash. They didn't know about it yet. The anonymous contact had said I'd have 6 hours after recording the surge before they tracked it. 6 hours to gather proof and upload it somewhere they couldn't reach. I started planning. The winter solstice seemed appropriate. December 21st, the longest night of the year, when ancient monuments worldwide align with celestial events. If the Earth's energy grid responded to cosmic cycles, this would be the night to prove it. I chose a site carefully, the intersection of 3 major ley lines near Carnac in Brittany, France. The famous stone rows there were just the visible part of a massive Neolithic complex, most of it on private land away from tourist routes. I'd identified a specific confluence point in a forest grove, marked by a small standing stone unknown to archaeology. The 2-week preparation was meticulous. I withdrew cash gradually, never more than €200 at a time, bought a used van with fake registration, gathered camping equipment, emergency supplies, and most importantly a satellite internet transmitter that could upload directly to multiple servers simultaneously. They were still watching me in Brussels, but their surveillance had grown lazy. Same operative, same patterns. On December 19th, I led him on a boring tour of grocery stores and laundromats, then slipped out the back of a cinema showing a 3-hour film. By the time he realised I was gone, I was already crossing into France on secondary roads. The grove near Karnak was exactly as satellite images had shown, a circle of ancient oaks surrounding a moss-covered menhir about 2 metres tall. The stone was carved with spiral patterns worn nearly smooth by millennia of weather. When I placed my hand on it, I felt a subtle vibration, like standing near a massive subwoofer playing below human hearing. I set up the sensor array according to the anonymous blueprints. Copper coils arranged in a complex mandala, crystal oscillators at specific angles, the whole apparatus connected to recording equipment and the satellite uplink. If this worked, data would stream to servers in 12 countries simultaneously. As sunset approached, my conventional instrument started showing anomalies. The magnetometer detected fluctuations in a rhythmic pattern, almost like a heartbeat. The frequency analyzer picked up ultra-low sounds below 7 Hz, the range that some researchers claim can induce altered states of consciousness. Then the sun touched the horizon, and everything changed. The copper coils began resonating, producing a tone that I felt more than heard. The crystals started glowing with a faint blue luminescence, not reflected light, but actual emission. The recording equipment went haywire, needles dancing across their maximum ranges. At the moment of sunset, 5:47 p.m. local time, the surge hit. The ground beneath me vibrated like a struck bell. The standing stone lit up with phosphorescent patterns, spirals of light racing across its surface following the ancient carvings. The air itself seemed to thicken, taking on a golden quality that made everything appear to be underwater. My body felt weightless, not floating, but as if gravity had simply forgotten about me. I watched my hand rise without conscious thought, fingers spreading to touch the charged air. Electricity danced between my fingertips, not painful, but ecstatic, like every nerve was firing with pure information. The sensor array was screaming data into the satellite feed, electromagnetic readings off the scale, gravitational anomalies that shouldn't exist, temperature fluctuations that defied thermodynamics, all of it streaming live to servers worldwide, impossible to suppress or delete simultaneously. Through the golden haze I saw them, spheres of light moving through the forest. Not aircraft, not drones, perfect orbs of luminescence following the ley line like trains on invisible tracks. They moved silently, purposefully, some the size of basketballs, others as large as cars. One passed directly over me, and for a moment I felt connected to something vast, a network of energy that wrapped the planet like neural pathways. The revelation hit me all at once. The ley lines weren't just electromagnetic corridors, they were conscious. Not alive exactly, but aware. The Earth itself was a single vast organism, and these lines were its sensory network, its method of experiencing and responding to everything on its surface. The ancient builders hadn't just discovered the grid, they'd communicated with it. Their monuments were interface points, allowing human consciousness to merge temporarily with planetary awareness. That's why sacred sites induced religious experiences. That's why people felt transformed at these locations. And now, modern civilization was damaging this network. Every skyscraper driven deep into the earth, every mine boring through the corridors, every electromagnetic broadcast interfering with the natural frequencies, we were giving the planet the equivalent of nerve damage. The surge peaked at 6:13 p.m, lasting exactly 26 minutes. Then, as suddenly as it began, everything stopped. The lights vanished. The stone went dark. My equipment powered down simultaneously, despite having hours of battery remaining. In the sudden silence, I heard vehicles approaching. Many vehicles. I grabbed the memory cards from the recording equipment and ran. Behind me, floodlights blazed to life, turning the grove into harsh daylight. Voices shouted in multiple languages. A helicopter thundered overhead, its searchlights sweeping through the trees. But I'd prepared for this. My real van was hidden 2 kilometers away. The one by the grove was a decoy, purchased for this specific purpose. While they surrounded it, I was already driving down back roads toward a safe house I'd arranged weeks earlier. The data had uploaded successfully, 87 gigabytes of impossible readings that proved the Earth's energy grid was real, measurable, and more powerful than anyone imagined. Within hours, It would be mirrored on servers worldwide, impossible to suppress completely. But as I drove through the darkness, one thought haunted me. If the grid was conscious, if the Earth itself was aware, what did it think of what we were doing to it? And more terrifyingly, how long before it decided to stop tolerating us? The safe house was a converted barn in the Pyrenees, owned by a conspiracy theorist named Marcus, who'd contacted me through encrypted channels after my data went live. He believed the government was controlling weather through chemtrails, which was absurd, but he also had solar panels, satellite internet, and absolutely no trust in authority. Exactly what I needed. For 3 days, I watched my findings ripple across the internet. Alternative news sites ran with headlines like, "Proof Earth's secret energy grid exposed." Scientists on Twitter debated the data's authenticity. Skeptics called it an elaborate hoax, but enough people with credentials were taking it seriously that mainstream media couldn't ignore it entirely. Then Marcus knocked on my door at dawn on the 4th day. "You have a visitor, says you're expecting him." I wasn't expecting anyone. The man standing in Marcus's kitchen looked like a university professor from the 1970s. Corduroy jacket with elbow patches, wild grey hair, thick glasses repaired with tape. He was drinking tea from a chipped mug and studying my printed data with intense focus. "Mr. Morrison," he said without looking up, "my name is Professor Emanuel Richter. I'm the one who sent you the sensor blueprints." The anonymous contact. I studied him carefully. "How did you find me?" "The same way they'll find you eventually, the satellite uplink signature. But I know how to mask my movements. 30 years of practice." He finally looked at me, his eyes sharp behind the thick lenses. "Your data is magnificent, but you're missing the larger picture." "Enlighten me!" He pulled out a battered laptop and opened a file filled with equations I couldn't begin to understand. "The ley lines aren't just electromagnetic. That's merely the aspect we can measure with current technology. They're multi-dimensional conduits, channels through space-time itself. That's impossible. So is your gravitational anomaly data, yet there it is." He pulled up a world map covered in glowing lines. Every ancient culture had different names for it. Chi in China, Prana in India, Pneuma in Greece. They were all describing the same phenomenon, a fundamental force that mainstream physics hasn't acknowledged. Why hasn't physics acknowledged it? Richter laughed bitterly. Because those who discover it either join the suppression or disappear. I was part of the suppression for 20 years. He told me his story. In 1973, fresh from MIT with a PhD in theoretical physics, he'd been recruited by a Defense Department think tank. His job, investigate anomalous energy readings at ancient sites worldwide. Within 2 years, his team had mapped the basic structure of the Earth grid and realised its potential. Unlimited clean energy, he said. Instantaneous communication across any distance. Even manipulation of localised space-time. The military applications were obvious, but so were the benefits for humanity. We could have transformed civilization. What happened? We succeeded. His face darkened. The first experimental tap into a ley line intersection was in Nevada, 1978. We pulled enough energy in 30 seconds to power Las Vegas for a year. Then the intersection point destabilized. He showed me a classified photo, a perfectly circular crater 300 meters across, the sand turned to glass. The official record lists it as an underground nuclear test, but no bomb did that. We'd ruptured something fundamental in the grid structure. The project was immediately classified beyond top secret. Research continued, but focused on weaponization rather than energy production. HARP, Richter explained, wasn't about weather modification or mind control, those were cover stories. It was about learning to manipulate the grid without destabilizing it. But they're failing, he continued. Every year more intersection points become unstable. The Haiti earthquake, the Japanese tsunami, the increase in volcanic activity, they're all symptoms of grid breakdown. Caused by what? Everything. Mining operations cutting through ley lines, fracking disrupting deep conduits, cities spreading concrete over intersection points. But the worst damage comes from electromagnetic pollution, cellular towers, Wi-Fi, satellite transmissions. We're drowning out the Earth's natural frequency. He pulled up another image, a graph showing electromagnetic background radiation over time. It had increased 10,000-fold since 1900. The ancients understood balance, Richter said. Their monuments weren't just markers, they were regulators. Stone circles amplified and stabilized the energy. Pyramids acted as capacitors, storing excess power. Temple complexes provided controlled release points. It was a planetary management system maintained for thousands of years. Until we forgot, until we were made to forget. His expression hardened. The knowledge was deliberately suppressed, first by religions that wanted monopolies on spiritual experience, then by governments that wanted monopolies on power, now by corporations that profit from scarcity. A car engine growled outside. Marcus appeared in the doorway, shotgun in hand. 3 black SUVs coming up the mountain road. Richter stood calmly. They tracked me, not you. I've been sloppy, getting old, I suppose. He handed me a flash drive. Everything I couldn't publish, 40 years of research, the complete grid map, the frequency specifications, the names of everyone involved in the cover-up. Come with me, I said. We can both run. I'm 73 years old, Mr. Morrison. I've been running since 1991. He smiled sadly. But information wants to be free. Upload that data everywhere. Send it to journalists, scientists, anyone who'll listen. Make it impossible to suppress. The vehicles were getting closer. Marcus was already at his truck, engine running. Richter walked to the door, then turned back. One more thing. The grid isn't just breaking down, it's evolving. The electromagnetic pollution we're producing is forcing it to adapt, to develop new pathways. The lights you saw at Karnak, they're increasing worldwide. The grid is trying to heal itself, but if we don't stop interfering, he shook his head, the Earth will protect itself, even if that means eliminating the infection. We're the infection? From the planet's perspective? Yes. He walked out to meet the SUVs. I ran to Marcus's truck and we tore down the back road as fast as the ancient vehicle could manage. In the mirrors, I saw men in tactical gear surrounding the farmhouse. Richter stood in the doorway, hands raised, dignity intact, even in surrender. We drove for 6 hours, changing vehicles twice, before I felt safe enough to stop. In a roadside motel that still used actual keys, I opened Richter's flash drive. The data was staggering. Detailed maps of every ley line intersection on Earth. Energy readings from 6 decades of secret monitoring. Photos of ancient sites I'd never heard of, all showing the same telltale signs of grid integration. And a list of names. Politicians, CEOs, military leaders, all aware of the grid's existence, all complicit in hiding it. But most importantly, there were the repair protocols. Richter's team had developed methods to stabilize damaged intersection points, to restore the grid's natural balance, the knowledge to undo decades of damage, the blueprints for saving the planet's nervous system. The cafe in Prague is busy enough that I blend in, anonymous among the tourists and students. My laptop is connected through 7 proxy servers, my identity masked by layers of encryption that would make the NSA proud. The barista brings my 3rd espresso of the morning, and I nod my thanks without looking up from the screen. The world has changed since Karnak. Not visibly. The same traffic jams clog the streets, the same politicians make the same promises, the same corporations chase the same profits. But underneath, in the invisible currents that connect all things, something fundamental has shifted. Richter's data didn't just expose the conspiracy, it provided a roadmap for resistance. The first wave of releases came through WikiLeaks, the Panama Papers network, and a dozen smaller journalism outlets simultaneously. By the time the suppression teams realized the scope of the leak, copies were already spreading across the dark web faster than they could be eliminated. The names, the cover-up, the military applications, all of it laid bare for anyone willing to look. The mainstream media tried to ignore it at first, then dismissed it as fringe pseudoscience. But when MIT physicists began replicating the sensor readings, when archaeological teams started confirming the monument alignments, when seismologists noticed the correlation between grid disruption and earthquake patterns, denial became impossible. The second wave was more practical. Anonymous networks of researchers, hackers and activists began building Richter's stabilization devices. The components were surprisingly accessible. Copper coils, quartz crystals, simple electronics. Within months, guerrilla grid repair operations were springing up worldwide. They called themselves the Earth Guardians, though the media branded them eco-terrorists after the first infrastructure disruption. A cellular tower in California went offline for 3 days when activists installed a resonance dampener at its base. A fracking operation in Pennsylvania was forced to shut down when mysterious equipment failures plagued their site. The authorities couldn't understand how protesters were disabling billion-dollar installations with what looked like art projects. They still don't understand that they're not fighting the technology, they're working with it. The grid wants to heal itself, we're just helping it remember how. The third wave is happening now, and it's the most dangerous one yet, because the Earth is starting to respond. I click through the news feeds on my encrypted browser. A magnitude 6.2 earthquake in Nevada, precisely centered on a classified military facility. The official story blames shifting tectonic plates, but satellite images show the epicenter is a perfect circle exactly 300 meters across, the same dimensions as Richter's 1978 crater. The Earth is healing that old wound, and anything built on top of it is simply relocated. Similar natural disasters are occurring worldwide. A mysterious sinkhole swallowed a Chinese mining operation that was drilling through a major ley line. The Large Hadron Collider experienced a catastrophic failure that physicists can't explain. Every component simply stopped working simultaneously, as if the Earth itself had withdrawn permission for the experiment. The most telling incidents are the recoveries. Ancient sites that had been disrupted by modern construction are spontaneously healing. The stones of Avebury, displaced by roads and buildings, have begun generating electromagnetic fields so powerful that nearby electronic equipment fails. The original Nazca lines in Peru are glowing again, visible from space without infrared enhancement. Reports of luminous phenomena are increasing exponentially. The same spheres of light I witnessed at Karnak are now appearing at intersection points across the globe. The scientific community calls them ball lightning or atmospheric plasma events, but those of us who know the truth understand what we're seeing. The Earth's immune system activating, my encrypted messenger pings, a new report from our monitoring station in Scotland. Roslyn Chapel energy spike recorded at 14:47 GMT. Visual confirmation of grid activation. Stone began resonating at 7.83 Hz for approximately 30 minutes. Local electronics disrupted in 2-kilometre radius. Phenomenon spreading along ley line toward Edinburgh. Estimate arrival in 6 hours. 7.83 Hz. The Schumann resonance, the Earth's natural frequency. The planet is remembering how to sing. I close the laptop and step outside. Prague sprawls before me, a modern city built atop ancient foundations, and I can feel the tension beneath its streets. 3 major ley lines converge under Wenceslas Square, their intersection buried under centuries of construction. The grid flows around the obstruction now, like water around a stone, but the pressure is building. Soon, the Earth will decide whether to accommodate our cities or reclaim its sacred geometry. And honestly, after seeing what we've done to the planet's nervous system, I'm not sure I'd blame it for choosing reclamation. My phone buzzes, a text from an unknown number. Café Louvre, corner table, 5 minutes. I almost ignore it. Anonymous contacts have led to both salvation and near capture over the past 6 months. But something about the message feels different, urgent without being threatening. The Café Louvre is just around the corner, a historic establishment that once hosted Einstein and Kafka. I find the corner table occupied by a woman in her 50s, professionally dressed but with the weathered hands of someone who works outdoors. Her eyes are the pale blue of winter sky. It takes me a moment to recognise her without the wool shawl. The old woman from Holubis, the one who warned me to stop digging. She looks younger somehow, more vibrant, as if the past months have restored something vital that had been missing. "Sit," she says in accented English. "We have much to discuss and little time." I remain standing. "Who are you?" "My name is Dr. Vera Novarkova." I was Professor Richter's research partner from 1975 to 1991. When the project went dark, I returned to Prague and spent 30 years watching the grid deteriorate, watching the old ways die. She gestures to the empty chair. Please, the Earth Guardians need guidance from someone who understands the ancient protocols. Slowly I sit. You've been monitoring us? Protecting you. The network Marcus connected you to. Half of those encrypted channels run through servers I maintain. The financial accounts that kept you hidden, funded by a trust I established decades ago. Did you think your escape from Karnak was purely your own skill? The revelation hits like cold water. You've been manipulating everything. Facilitating. There's a difference. She pulls out a tablet showing a world map covered in pulsing nodes of light. The grid is awakening faster than we anticipated. Your data release accelerated the process. What should have taken decades is happening in months. That's good, isn't it? The Earth healing itself? Her expression darkens. Healing, yes, but healing can be traumatic. When a broken bone resets itself, the process is violent. The grid is preparing to realign the planet's energy flows, and everything built in opposition to those flows will be swept aside. She zooms in on major cities, each one sitting atop intersection points like tumours on nerve endings. New York, London, Tokyo, they're all going to be tested. The grid will offer them a choice, adapt or be removed. Most will choose to fight rather than change. So we warn them, show them the repair protocols. Do you really think the forces that suppressed this knowledge for 70 years will suddenly embrace it? That governments and corporations will voluntarily dismantle the systems that gave them power? She shakes her head. They'll try to weaponize the awakening instead, turn the Earth's own defense mechanisms against their enemies. The chill runs through me as I understand the implications. They'll try to control the grid. They're already trying. HARP has been broadcasting disruption frequencies for weeks. The Chinese are using their rare Earth mining operations to physically sever ley lines. The Russians are detonating nuclear devices at intersection points, trying to create artificial nodes they can control. The tablet shows the results. Chaotic feedback loops spreading across the planet's energy network like infection. Every intervention makes the situation worse. They're not just damaging individual lines anymore, they're destabilizing the entire system. What happens if the grid fails completely? Dr. Novakova closes the tablet. According to our models, the planet's magnetic field becomes erratic, weather patterns collapse, tectonic stability fails, the biosphere begins to shut down. She meets my eyes. Extinction event. Not just for humans, for everything. The weight of it settles over me like a shroud. We're not just fighting for disclosure anymore, or even for environmental protection. We're fighting for the continuation of life on Earth. So what do we do? She slides a memory chip across the table. The complete archive. Every site, every frequency, every ancient protocol we've recovered. But also something new. Integration codes. Integration codes? The monuments were just the beginning. The ancients didn't just build regulatory structures, they created organic interfaces. Humans who could merge temporarily with the grid consciousness, becoming living nodes in the network. The genetic markers still exist in certain bloodlines. My hand freezes halfway to the memory chip. You're talking about human sacrifice. Not sacrifice. Symbiosis. Her voice carries a strange resonance as if speaking from great depth. The planet needs conscious partners, not just passive regulators. People willing to become part of the grid itself to help guide the awakening. And you think I'm one of these bloodlines? I know you are. The way you responded to the energy at Karnak, the ease with which you detected the grid patterns, these aren't learned skills, Mr. Morrison. They're genetic memories. She stands, leaving the chip on the table. The network is ready to make you an offer. Full integration. Consciousness expanded beyond individual awareness. Partnership in planetary stewardship. In exchange for what? Your human life. Your individual existence. You would become something larger, but you would cease to be Alex Morrison. The cafe continues around us, conversations in Czech and English. The hiss of the espresso machine, the clink of cups on saucers. Normal life proceeding as if we weren't discussing the potential end of human civilization. How long do I have to decide? The awakening reaches critical phase at the next solar maximum, 18 months. After that, the grid will make its own decisions about humanity's future, with or without conscious human partners. She walks away, pausing at the door. The old woman who warned you at Holubis. She made the integration choice in 1968, during the Prague Spring. The Soviets thought they were suppressing political uprising, but they were really trying to prevent grid awakening. She's been guiding the network ever since, preserving the knowledge until the right time. And you? Dr. Novakova smiles, and for a moment her eyes glow with the same blue light I'd seen in the copper coils. I made my choice years ago. Everything I've done since has been the grid working through me, including finding you. She steps into the Prague afternoon and vanishes into the crowd. I sit alone with the memory chip, feeling the weight of impossible decision. Save the planet by joining it. Preserve humanity by transcending it. Outside, storm clouds are gathering despite the morning's clear forecast. Through the cafe window I can see electrical discharges dancing between the cloud layers. Not lightning, but something more purposeful. The grid flexing its muscles, testing its strength. My laptop chimes with incoming messages from Earth Guardian cells worldwide. Similar phenomena are being reported from every continent. The awakening is accelerating. I slip the memory chip into my pocket and pay for my coffee. Whatever choice I make, it won't be here in this cafe, surrounded by the comfortable illusions of normal life. It will be at an intersection point, where the planet's consciousness runs closest to the surface, where human and Earth awareness can touch. The old town square of Prague is a 15-minute walk, built over one of the most powerful convergence points in Europe. As I step into the street, I can already feel it calling, a deep thrumming beneath the cobblestones, a magnetic pull that bypasses rational thought and speaks directly to something ancestral in my cells. Time to find out what I really am and what I might become. This message was uploaded simultaneously to 12,847 servers worldwide at 11:47 GMT on March 21st, the spring equinox. Source analysis indicates the transmission originated from Prague, Czech Republic, but routing through quantum encrypted channels makes precise location impossible. To anyone receiving this, my name was Alex Morrison, and this is my final report. I'm writing this from the Old Town Square in Prague, sitting on the steps of the astronomical clock. It's just past midnight, and the square is empty except for me and the growing sphere of blue light that hovers above the central flagstones. The light is beautiful. Not harsh like electric illumination, but soft and deep, like looking into the heart of a star. I can feel it calling to me. The memory chip Dr. Novakova gave me contained everything she promised, and more. The complete archive of human grid interactions spanning 5,000 years, bloodline genealogies tracing back to the monument builders, and the integration protocols, step-by-step instructions for conscious merger with planetary consciousness. I've spent the past 3 hours uploading everything to dead drops and secure servers across the globe. By the time anyone reads this, the information will be replicated beyond any possibility of suppression. The grid won't die with me, but more importantly, I've realised that choice was an illusion. The integration isn't something I can accept or refuse. It's already happening. Has been happening since that first moment in Holubix, when my equipment failed and I felt something vast and patient taking notice of me. Every breakthrough, every narrow escape, every perfectly timed contact, none of it was luck or skill. The grid has been slowly incorporating me into itself, preparing me for this moment. The Alex Morrison who started this journey no longer exists. What remains is something between human and other, a bridge between two forms of consciousness. The sphere is descending now, close enough that I can see patterns moving within its light, mathematical forms that hurt to look at directly, but speak to parts of my brain that shouldn't exist. I understand now why the ancients built their monuments with such precision. They weren't following blueprints. They were translating visions like this one into stone and earth. Around the world, others are receiving similar calls. The bloodlines are awakening. Not many, perhaps a few thousand individuals scattered across the planet, but enough. Enough to serve as living nodes in the network, enough to help guide the transformation. Because that's what this is. Not an ending, but a metamorphosis. The environmental crisis, the grid breakdown, the increasing natural disasters, they're birth pangs. The Earth is evolving into something new, something that can consciously participate in cosmic processes instead of simply enduring them. But evolution requires cooperation, and cooperation requires communication. That's where we come in. The bridges, the translators. I can feel my individual thoughts beginning to merge with something infinitely larger. Not lost, expanded. Like a drop of water finally understanding that it was always part of the ocean. The fear is gone now, replaced by wonder at the sheer scope of what I'm becoming part of. The sphere touches my forehead, and suddenly I can perceive the entire planet as a single living system. Every heartbeat, every breath, every growing plant and moving animal connected by streams of light that pulse in perfect rhythm. The ley lines aren't empty channels. They're full of consciousness, carrying the thoughts and dreams and experiences of everything that has ever lived on Earth. And beyond Earth, other networks stretch across the galaxy. Planetary minds in conversation across impossible distances, sharing the wisdom gained from billions of years of conscious evolution. We're not alone. We never were. We just weren't developed enough to hear the conversation. Until now, the transformation is accelerating. I can feel other nodes coming online. In the Amazon rainforest, where an indigenous shaman stepped into a similar sphere of light. At Uluru, where an Aboriginal elder touched the songlines and felt them sing back. At Glastonbury Tor, where a British physicist finally understood why his equations had been leading him there. We are becoming the Earth's nervous system, its immune system, its consciousness. The governments and corporations will try to fight this change, of course. They'll use their weapons and their machines and their desperate attempts to control forces they can't comprehend. But they're fighting the planet itself now, and planets are patient in ways that human institutions cannot imagine. Some cities will fall, some systems will collapse, but from the wreckage something better will grow. A civilization in harmony with its living world instead of at war with it. The survivors will learn to listen to the Earth's voice, to build with the grid instead of against it, to see themselves as part of a larger organism instead of its masters. It won't be easy, evolution never is, but it will be beautiful. The light is surrounding me completely now. I can barely remember being separate from it. Soon this human form will dissolve, and what was Alex Morrison will become part of something vast and interconnected and eternal. But first, one final message for anyone who finds this record. The grid is not our enemy. It never was. It's our mother, our teacher, our future. Those of you who can feel its call, don't resist. Step into the light. Become part of the solution. Those who can't or won't, please step aside. The Earth is healing itself, and it will not be stopped by fear or greed, or the desperate clinging to systems that no longer serve. The age of separation is ending. The age of integration has begun. Welcome to the awakening.